It's under contract to the Preservation Survey. Amina shoved herself upright again. That's true, so why are you telling me to say it like it's a lie? Because under contract means something completely different to them. In the Preservation Alliance, it meant I'd agreed to work for the survey for a specifically limited amount of time in return for compensation. In the Corporation Rim, it would have meant that the survey had rented me from an owner, the same way you'd rent your habitat or your terrain vehicle, except humans usually had warm feelings toward their habitats and terrain vehicles. Ross seemed confused by Amina's answer, but he just said, "We need something that will take out those drones." He started to search through the emergency kit and pulled out a container of fire suppressant. This might work. Electra slid down to sit on the floor. She offered Amina the medication container. I don't think I've heard of the Preservation Survey. Is that a subsidiary of another corporation? Or double quotes while Amina explained the concept of a non-corporate polity to Electra, and how many polities did actually have surveys and stations in cities and so on, and weren't just people in loincloths screaming at each other. I reached the quarters and started a quick search. Some cabins were clearly unused, mostly the ones with multiple bunks that were meant for students. The beds were still folded up in the walls, and there were no personal possessions in sight, just like the last time I had been here. Other cabins showed recent habitation, beds and furniture deployed, bedding in place but disarrayed, clothing and personal objects and hygiene items lying around, like the crew had just been here, had just stepped away right before I looked in. It was creepy, with no movement except the air system, making the fabric tassels of a wall decoration flutter. Still no sign of any bodies. I sent to Amina, "Don't tell the corporates that you're Dr. Mentz's daughter." "I'm not stupid," she shot back. They were past the explanation of what preservation was and were finally exchanging actual information, including their names and what the hell was going on. Amina said, "This ship attacked us right after we came out of the wormhole." "How did you get aboard?" "It attacked us too. We were on a supply transport supporting the main expedition ship, an Explorer, when this ship started to fire on us. We escaped in a shuttle, then we were pulled aboard. At least that's what I think happened." Electra shoved her hair back and looked exhausted. "They did something that knocked us unconscious in the shuttle. One moment we were there, the next we were lying on the deck in this ship, and those gray people were laughing at us. I don't know what happened to the others. I wondered if the shuttle was still aboard, if Art's shuttles were still aboard. Without access to Art's systems, I couldn't tell without a physical search, like I didn't have enough to do right now. Speaking of which, I tapped Scout 1, which was still trapped in the bridge control area, and told it to do a systematic scan of any active displays it could find. "We don't know why they took us," Ross said. "They locked us in a cabin and just left us there. We don't know what they want. They wouldn't tell us. The Explorer was much faster," Electra said. "It might have gotten away. I think our base ship got away," Amina said slowly. "The SEG unit was trying to get us over to it, and they grabbed us and pulled us into their lock. There were too many places in Art that I hadn't searched yet, where the bodies of the crew might be stashed. Maybe I do watch too much media, because in the empty corridors, passing empty, but recently used rooms, I had an image of finding Mentz's family camp house like this, empty, no humans, just their possessions left behind, and no trace in the feed. No cameras, no way to find them. This was no time to be an idiot. "Is there any food or water in here?" Electra said. She rested her head in her hands. "I've got a terrible headache." Ross pushed to his feet, wincing. "There's a restroom with a water tap." In the next set of quarters, I started to find the anomalies. One cabin, I was pretty certain, was the one used to lock up Ross and Electra. A crumpled jacket that matched their uniforms lay on a bunk. The cabin didn't have an attached restroom, but didn't smell as bad as I would have expected. Humans trapped for multiple cycles with no access to water or sanitary devices is usually harder on the furniture. The targets must have been letting them out periodically. My process to select some audio, a series of conversations between two of my favorite recurring characters on Sanctuary Moon, finished. I stripped out music and effects, lowered the volume, and cut the sections together into an hour and 22 minutes, then relayed it to Scout 1 inside the sealed control area. It started to play the audio. I'd constructed the query to search for conversations where the two characters were whispering or speaking in low, agitated voices. The effect would be even better with Scout 1 roaming the control area looking for display surface data. I continued to search the quarters. I thought the targets must have been using these cabins too. They didn't exactly strike me as beings who would respect other beings' personal space, but the odd smell was the first indication I was right. Human living spaces tend to smell like dirty socks, even when they're clean. But this smell was oddly agricultural, like the growth medium used in food-producing systems. According to Scout 2 in the control area foyer, all the targets now had their helmets pressed up against the hatch, trying to hear the conversation inside. Despite everything, it was a little funny. "So, were you on a survey too?" Amina asked. I could tell she was trying to sound casual, but it may have been less obvious to the other humans. "No. Well, in a way," Ross said. He had filled some water containers from the restroom tap and brought them back for the group. "It was a recovery, an attempted recovery," Electra said. She took a long drink from a container and wiped her mouth. "Our division was assigned to work on lost settlements." She hesitated. "I'm not. It's proprietary information. I'm a junior survey intern, and I'm not even from the Corporation Rim," Amina pointed out. "I'm not going to tell anybody." Ross didn't seem as reluctant to explain as Electra. "We were on an assignment to recover a viable planet in one of the systems that were mapped before the Corporation Rim formed." "Do you know about those?" "Of course." Amina's brow was furrowed in confusion. "I didn't get it either. My education modules have gaps you could fly a gunship through, but I knew from the entertainment media that there had been exploration surveys pre-Corporation Rim. Corporations didn't actually invent space and planets, despite the patents the company had tried to file." Electra shifted, winced, then took a breath. "The locations to a lot of systems were lost before wormhole stabilizing tech was developed, but researchers find them sometimes and reconstructed data troves. If a corporation can find the planet's location, they can file for ownership. Then they're free to establish a colony. There was a lot of this type of speculation 40 or 50 years ago," Ross continued. "Of course, a lot of corporations overextended and went bankrupt over it too, and the colonies were lost." Lost? From Amina's expression, she understood now, but she didn't like it. "You mean abandoned colonies, settlements, where the first arrivals were just left to fend for themselves?" I understood now too. This was in preservation's historical dramas and documentaries. It had been settled by survivors of a colony which had been seeded and then began to fail as supplies were cut off. In preservation's case, an independent ship had arrived in time and managed to take the colonists to a more viable planet. The story was popular in preservation media. There's always a dramatic rendition of Captain Consuelo Macaba's speech about not leaving a single living thing behind to die. Mensa has a clip from one of the most popular ones on a display surface on the wall of her station office. If there'd been a sec unit in the colony, there probably would have been a compelling reason why it had to stay behind on the dying planet. I don't actually believe that. Sometimes I believe that. Reclaiming the lost colonies is big. "Business now," Ross said. He finished his water and set the container aside. "The terraforming equipment is usually still in place, as well as habitats and other salvage. Amina's expression was flat and stony. She pretended to need to fiddle with her wound packs so she didn't have to look at them. "So, did you find a lost colony?" "We were attacked on the way there," Electra said as Ross was drawing breath to answer. "I found a larger cabin that looked like it had been deliberately trashed. Clothing lay trampled on the floor, some of it in the blue of Art's crew uniform. Hygiene items had been opened and dumped or smeared around on the small attached restroom. A couple of actual static art pieces and a holographic print of humans playing musical instruments had been thrown on the floor and broken. Someone had tried to break a display surface, but hadn't managed it, and it floated sideways, still showing a static image of two male humans. Not young, maybe Mensa's age or older, but that was as much as I could guess. I was no good at judging human ages. One had dark skin and no hair on the front half of his head, and the other was lighter with short, white hair. They were both smiling at the camera with an embossed version of Art's logo on the wall behind them. I could look them up in my archive of Art's crew complement, but I didn't want to. I felt something build in my chest. I pulled a recording of my conversations with Art. The way it said, "My crew, it was bad enough that Art must be dead." It wasn't fair that the humans it had loved so much were dead too. I wanted to find a bunch more algae-smelling, gray, snotty-ish holes and kill the shit out of every single one. A sudden 5% dip in performance reliability made my knees go shaky, and I leaned on the cabin hatch for 12 seconds. It seemed like a good idea to slide all the way down to the deck and just stay there. But I should get back to Amina. Also, after the targets had rampaged through here, the deck was pretty disgusting. In the medical suite, the conversation had moved back to me. "Oh, goody," Electra was saying, "you really have to be careful. That sec unit seems to have been altered to make it look less like a bot, but that doesn't change." "They're programming." Amina said, not looking at her, still picking at the wound pack on her leg. Ross put in, "I know you think it's trying to protect you. It's not trying." Amina's tone was clipped. "It's protecting me, but they're not reliable," Ross persisted. "It's because of the human neural tissue." Well, he wasn't wrong. Ross added, "They go rogue and attack their contract holders and support staff." Amina bit her lip and squinched up her eyes in a way that said she was suppressing an emotion, but I couldn't tell what. "I wonder why that is," she said in a flat voice. On the way to medical, I walked through the galley and the classroom compartments and swung by a supply locker and grabbed a prepacked emergency ration bag. They had an awful lot of supplies in here for planetary exploration, not what you'd expect on a ship whose jobs were mapping and teaching and cargo. As I turned down the corridor, I tapped Amina's feed to tell her I was coming back and started reviewing my archive, comparing the time I had been aboard Art before with what I saw now. Did I actually know what Art and its crew did? I had never bothered to ask. Deep space research sounded boring, almost as boring as guarding mining equipment. In the med bay, Electra was saying, "You're very lucky it didn't turn on you while you were being held on this ship. You must have been locked up here with it for days and days." Wait, what? Great, were the humans having problems perceiving reality? Even more than the usual problems humans have perceiving reality? That was all I needed. Amina was just going to have to deal with it because I was busy. Amina was baffled. No, we just got here. Just a little while ago, right before the gray people dragged me into that room. Ross rubbed his face, either concealing his expression or just genuinely unwell. Electra looked pitying. "I think you're confused." Amina's expression scrunched up again, but she shook her head. "Look, a Sakinat's coming back, so you need to stop saying all this stuff about it. I know you believe it, but you're wrong and I don't want to hear it. And I think maybe we're both confused, because maybe staring at space and teaching young humans to stare at space Wasn't all Art's crew did. Maybe Art had let me think that, right? So I had drone input from the medical bay, but I wasn't paying attention to it. I was searching for images of stored supplies to compare and look for anomalies, missing items, other clues. So I only had a 1.4-second warning when I stepped through the hatch and Ross fired a weapon at me. For a human, his aim was great. Chapter 6. Fortunately, it was an energy weapon and not a Secunit head-busting projectile. It still fucking hurt. I flinched and rammed into the side of the hatch, ow, and dove sideways to avoid the second blast, except there wasn't one, because Ross was flailing instead of aiming. Amina had jumped on his back and was trying to choke him out. It was a good effort, but she didn't have the leverage to really clamp down with her forearm. Electra stood nearby, waving her arms and yelling, "Stop! What are you doing? Stop!" which was frankly the most sensible thing I had heard a human say in hours. It also told me this wasn't a planned attack, which is what stopped me from putting a drone through Ross's face. Also, I was running out of drones. If I sound calm, I was actually not calm. I thought I'd had control of the situation, sort of control, okay? Don't laugh, and then it had unraveled rapidly. I pushed off the hatch and walked over to pick up the weapon Ross had dropped. It was like, or possibly identical to, or possibly actually was, the tube-like energy weapon Target 2 had used on me. Ross must have picked it up while I was distracted by having an emotional breakdown. Yeah, that was a huge mistake. It had caused pain in my organic tissue, but it hadn't disrupted any processes, so I knew it would be no use on the target drones. But at least it should work on the targets. I put it in my jacket pocket. Then I stepped in, kicked Ross in the back of the kneecap, and caught Amina around the waist. He hit the floor and I set her on her feet. Amina was almost as angry as I was. "What's wrong with you?" She shouted at Ross. She glared at Electra, who made a helpless, baffled gesture. You know, if Ross was going to turn on me, he might have at least warned Electra first so she wasn't standing around wondering what the hell was going on. Ross shoved to his feet and said, "You can't trust any of them. It could be any of them. They control them." He staggered back away from us. His eyes were unfocused. "You don't. Any of them." Amina's furious expression turned confused. Any of what? That was a good question. I'd seen humans do irrational things, a lot of irrational things, and encounter situations that made them act in ways that were counterproductive at best. This was not the first time I'd been shot in the head by a human I was trying to protect. Let's put it that way. But this was odd, even granting the fact that I'd physically intimidated Ross earlier. Electra winced and pressed a hand to her head. "Ross, that doesn't make sense." What? Then her eyes rolled up and she collapsed. Amina made a grab for her, then flinched away when Ross folded up and hit the floor. Then Electra started to convulse. Amina threw herself down on the deck, trying to support Electra's head. Ross lay in a tumble, completely limp. Amina looked frantic. I was a little frantic too. "They took some medication from the emergency kit," she said. She jerked her head toward the open kit and the container beside it. "They're supposed to be analgesics. Could they be poisoned?" It wasn't a bad suggestion, but if this was something in the medication, I thought the reaction would involve bodily fluids and be way more disgusting. Amina wasn't affected, so it wasn't something spread by contact or transmitted through the air system or the water containers. Electra looked more like her nervous system was being jolted by a power source. Ross looked dead. I stepped over to the emergency kit, still sitting on the bench. It had some limited autonomous functions and had expanded and opened new compartments, responding to the human's distress. I took the small medical scanner it was trying to hand me and pointed it at Ross. It sent its report to my feed with scan images of the inside of Ross's body. A power source had jolted through the upper part of his chest, destroying the important parts there for pumping blood and breathing. It looked, oddly, like what being punished by a governor module felt like. Now there's a thought. I checked Scout 2 in the control. Area foyer. The targets had stopped listening at the sealed hatch and were gathered around Target 4, who now held a strange, bulky device. It was 12 centimeters across and a millimeter thick, with a flat, old-fashioned, solid-state screen. I'd seen them on historical dramas. All the targets seemed excited about whatever it was showing them. If it was something that made the targets happy, it couldn't be good. My skin detected a tiny power. Source on both Electra and Ross. It hadn't been there earlier, so something had activated it, most likely a signal from Target 4's screen device. There was no time for finesse. I jammed the whole range. Electra slumped, limp and unconscious. If there'd been a last-ditch destroy the brain function, there was nothing I could do about it. Scout 2 now showed Target 4 poking angrily at the screen as the others watched in obvious disappointment. Huh, Amina, in the middle of yelling, will you stop just standing there and do something? Halted abruptly. The rest came out as a startled huff. She added, did you do that? Yes, I crouched down and lifted Electra out of Amina's lap. This was caused by implants. I carried Electra over to the nearest gurney and carefully set her down. Amina scrambled up and went to Ross. She reached for his arm and I said, he's dead. She jerked her hand back, then fumbled for the pulse in his neck. What? How? I sent the med scanner's images to her feed and she winced. You said it was an implant. Is that like an augment? No, it's like an implant. Augments were supposed to help humans do things they couldn't otherwise do, like interface with the feed more completely or store memory archives. Augments that weren't feed interfaces were meant to correct physical injuries or illnesses. Augments are helpful. Implants are like governor modules. I pointed the med scanner at Electra. It found a raised temperature, increased heart rate, and increased respiration rate. I didn't know what that meant, but it sounded bad. When this happened, I had a drone view of the targets in the central section using an unknown device. Amina pushed to her feet and stood beside Electra's gurney. She was accessing the medical scan data and her expression had that vague look that humans get when they're reading in their feed. That looks like an infection. Electra said her back hurt. Her face scrunching up with worry and fear, Amina carefully moved the dark hair away from Electra's neck, then half-turned her. She had to pull down the back of Electra's shirt to find it. Yeah, there was the implant. Amina sucked in a breath. That looks terrible. It was a metal ring, 1.1 centimeters. Wide, visible against the brown skin between Electra's shoulder blades. It sat in the middle of a rictus of swollen flesh that looked painful, even to me, and that was saying something. Normal external interfaces for humans were designed to look like all kinds of things, from carved natural wood, to skin tones, to jewels or stones or enamel art pieces, to actual plain metal with a brand logo. And why would Electra, who was an augmented human with an internal interface, need a second external one? And any remote chance that this was some kind of botched attempt at a medical or enhancement augment was outweighed by the fact that no human would put up with this when any med system could fix it in a few minutes at most, and botch was putting it mildly. It looked like a bad human medic had jammed it in with their toes. Amina was working the problem. Why didn't they tell us? We could have. Unless they didn't know it was there. They said they were unconscious when they were brought aboard. The consternation in her expression deepened. Did Ross's implant tell him to attack you? Or just make him so confused that he shot at the first person who walked in the door? These implants are obviously supposed to incapacitate them if they tried to escape, to keep them under control. I'm familiar with the concept, I told her. One of the indispensable benefits of being a rogue secunit, not having to pretend to attentively listen to a human's unnecessary explanations. I had one in my head, right? She flicked a startled look at me. I love it when humans forget that Sakinats are not just guarding and killing things voluntarily because we think it's fun. Then why did it take the gray people so long to activate the implants? Why didn't they do it right after we escaped? Yeah. About that, I hadn't kept her updated on my intel. I don't think the surviving targets knew what happened when we were captured. Amina argued, but that one target got away. I used my drones to kill that target and a third one after they locked themselves in the ship's control area. The other targets have been trying to get through the sealed hatch and seem to think we're inside. I sent Amina a section of my drone video from the control area. Foyer, they may think Aletra and Ross are in there with us, or they activated the implants to try to figure out where they are. Amina's gaze went vague as she reviewed the clip on her feed. Is that why they're listening to the hatch? I checked the input. Yeah, they were back to that again. My drone is playing a recording of a conversation. Amina lifted her brows. Right, that's really clever. Can you use the drones to threaten them and ... I showed her the clip of the change to the target's helmets. No, the security update prevents that. Amina grimaced and rubbed her brow. I see. So, how do we get to the bridge? You know, it's not like I'm half-assing this. I am actually trying my best despite the fuck-ups. I absolutely did not sound testy as I said, I don't know. I have a scout drone in the control area, but it can't access any of the systems. Amina stopped and looked at me with an incredulous expression. So we're locked out of the bridge, and the bot pilot is gone, and we don't know what's flying the ship. The good thing about being a construct is that you can't reproduce and create children to argue with you. This time, I did sound testy. I'm working on it. I turned the medical scanner's image so I could see what was under Aletra's implant. I really expected the shitty primitive governor module to have filaments extending directly into the human's nervous system, like a normal augment, but there were no filaments. The images the scanner sent to our feed connection showed the implant was self-contained, narrowing to a blunt point. Amina held up her hands. Fine, wow, you're so touchy. She added, okay, so if they knew these things were implanted, they would have asked us to help them, even if they didn't trust us. Her brow furrowed again. I can't imagine they wouldn't have. I agreed. They hadn't even asked about the med system or the medical equipment in the emergency kit. If I was a human and I had this thing jammed in me and I happened to run into a fully stocked medical suite to hide, it would have been at the top of my to-do list. We have to get this thing out before it kills her too. Amina studied the diagrams and images the scanner sent into our feed. It's really primitive. It must have been causing the confusion and pain, but that wouldn't make them forget it was there. I rotated the images so I could make sure I was right about the depth. No, something else did that. It's not very good for what it's trying to do. Amina made a violent jabbing motion at her own neck. If you knew it was there, and you could get away from the person trying to zap you, you could pop it out with a knife. Note to self. Make sure Amina has no reason to jab at her own neck with a knife. Not if you thought it was interwoven with your neural tissue. At least when I dealt with my governor module, I'd had access to my own schematics and diagnostics. Amina wasn't listening. She went over to rummage in the emergency kit. Her vital signs are getting worse. She found a laser scalpel case and brandished it. I'm going to try to take the implant out. You have medic. Training, it was worth asking. Basic training, sure. I was making an expression again, because she grimaced. I know. But you said we shouldn't use the med system, and we have to do something. She wasn't wrong. The kit was transmitting increasingly plaintive warnings. There was a lot of technical medical data to process, but the conclusion was obvious, that the activation had caused damage to Aletra, if not as much as it had to Ross. The kit was demanding we intervene soon. Most of my medical knowledge came from watching Med Center Argala, a historical drama series that had been popular 27 corporate standard years ago and was still available for download on almost every media feed I had ever encountered. Even I knew it was inaccurate. I also found it kind of boring, so I'd only watched it once. I held my hand out for the scalpel. Amina hesitated. Did she think I was going to kill Elettra? I'd put up with way more annoying humans, including some that she was related to. Then she handed the scalpel over, her expression a mix of relief and guilt. I could do it if I had to. Amina wanted to help, maybe to prove herself. I said, I know you could. She hadn't been bluffing about the neck-jabbing thing, I could tell. But if we were wrong, and removing the implant killed Elettra, at least this wouldn't be my first accidental murder. Also, my hands don't shake. Amina got another wound seal pack out and engaged the emergency kit's sterile field. I followed its instructions to spray anesthetic prep fluid. Then, with the occasional pop-up help hint from the kit's feed, I used the scalpel to cut through the damaged tissue. I had a drone view of Amina watching the hand scanner, her brow furrowed in half wince, half concentration. I avoided the bits that would bleed a lot, not something a human trying to do this to their own body could have managed. So there, Amina. And the implant popped out, and Elettra woke up. She gasped a breath, her eyes opened, staring without comprehension at Amina's stomach. I stepped back, and Amina hastily fit the pack over the wound before too much blood leaked out. It powered up and snugged in close to Elettra's skin. Her eyes fluttered closed again. From the report on the emergency kit's feed, the pack had delivered a hefty punch of painkillers and antibiotics. I put the implant in the little container the emergency kit offered, and the kit dutifully sprayed it with something. I hope the kit knew what it was doing, because I sure didn't. It's okay. It's okay, we're helping you, Amina was telling Elettra, patting her hand. Ross's body was there in the middle of everything, and that just felt wrong. I picked it up and carried it to a gurney on the far side of the room. In a supply cabinet, I found a cover to put over him, but before I did, I pulled down his jacket and shirt to look at his implant. It was on his shoulder blade, surrounded by damaged tissue, much thicker and more swollen than Elettra's. I wondered if he had known it was there at some point, if he had jabbed at his back with something trying to get it out before the targets made him forget. About it again, it was still a stupid thing to do, but I understood the impulse. I understood it a lot. Then the emergency kit blared an alarm through our feed as Elettra's pulse and respiration rate dropped. The kit flashed a handy annotated diagram of what we should do into the feed. Amina swore a lot and helped me roll Elettra over. I started chest compressions, being extremely careful with the amount of pressure I was exerting. Amina frantically grabbed for the resuscitation devices. The kit was trying to be helpful, but it was nothing like a med system sliding into my feed with everything I needed to know right there. It was urging me to start rescue breathing, but I couldn't. My lungs work in a completely different way than human lungs do. It's not only that I need much less air, but the connections are all different. Aside from the utterly disgusting thought of putting my mouth, which I talk with, on a human, I didn't think I could expel enough air for what the kit wanted me to do. Amina ran over and started the rescue breathing herself, but it wasn't working. I told her we need the mask. Amina gave up with a gasp of frustration and went back to the kit. She found the mask and wrestled with its sterile packaging, trying to rip the plastic with her teeth, and I couldn't stop compressions to help her. Yes, I did just realize we should have thought of this possibility earlier. They never showed humans getting the tools ready on Med Center Argala. It was all just there. Then, from across the compartment, the med system made a soft clunk and its platform lights turned violet. It had just powered on. Amina stopped, the mask in her hand finally. She spat out a piece of plastic wrapper and demanded, "Did you get it turned on?" "No, that was Art's med system, but without Art, its reactivated feed said it was operating at factory standard." It could be one more weird anomaly in this unending cycle of what the fuck. Or it could be a trick, target control system trying to get us to put Electra in there so it could kill her. Except that Electra was dying anyway, so why bother? And I tried not to see this as some remnant of Art still in the ship acting to save a human. Well, fuck it. I stopped. Compressions scooped up Electra and carried her to the med systems platform. I set her down, and the surgical suite dropped over her immediately, a pad settling over her chest to restart her heartbeat, and a much more complicated mask apparatus lowering to work on her respiration. In 6 seconds, it had her breathing on her own and her heartbeat stabilized. The platform contoured to roll her onto her side. Delicate feelers peeled away the wound. Hacken tossed it onto the deck, then started to knit the raw, bleeding spot in her back. On the gurney, the emergency kit beeped once in protest, then shut up. Amina let out a long breath of relief, then wiped her face on her sleeve. She started to gather the scattered pieces of the kit's resuscitation gear, trying to fit them back into their containers. She said, "So what turned the med system on?" I said, "I know as much as you do about what is happening on this ship, which is why I put the unknown corporate human who is dying anyway in the possibly compromised med system, and not, say, Amina or myself. I didn't like that Electra had nearly died, despite the fact that we had followed all the instructions carefully. I didn't like that Ross had died before we could do anything. I especially didn't like that the targets had killed him. He wasn't my human, but he had popped off right in front of me, and I hadn't been able to do anything about it. They're so fucking fragile." Amina glared, then eyed me speculatively. "Are you sure you're not hurt? You did get shot in the head again? And didn't that gray person shoot you before you tore their lungs out?" I hadn't felt any lungs while I was rummaging around in Target 2's chest cavity, but I'm sure they were in there somewhere. It was just an energy weapon. It was just an energy weapon, Amina muttered to herself in a very bad imitation of my voice, while determinedly trying to fit the mask attachment with the oxygen nodules into the wrong slot. "If you weren't so angry at me, you'd realize I was right. For fuck's sake, I am not angry at you, okay? That's a lie. I was angry at her, or really annoyed at her, and I had no idea why. It wasn't her fault she was here. We were here. She hadn't done anything but be human, and she wasn't even whiny, and her first reaction to another human shooting me had been to jump on his back and try to choke him." Amina gave up on the mask and gave me her full attention. "You look angry. That's just something my face does sometimes. This is why helmets with opaque face plates are a good idea." Amina snorted in disbelief. "Yes, when you're angry." She hesitated, and I couldn't interpret her expression, except that it wasn't annoyed anymore. I should have said more when they were talking about you. It was just like my history and political consciousness class. I didn't think the instructors were making things up, but it was just like the examples they used. They'd been talking about me as a sec unit, the way humans always talked about sec units, and it had been pretty mild compared to a lot of things I had heard humans say. If I got angry every time that happened, I don't know, but it sounded exhausting. Talking about this was exhausting. "I'm not angry about that," Amina demanded. "If you're not angry, then what's wrong?" I was definitely glaring now. "How do you want the list sorted? By timestamp or degree of survivability?" Amina said in exasperation, "I mean, what's wrong with you?" There's that question again, but I assumed she didn't want to discuss the existential quandary posed by my entire existence. I got hit on the head by an unidentified drone and shot. You were there, not that. Why are you sad and upset? That was the point where even I could tell that Amina was terrified as well as furious. There's something you're not telling me, and it's scaring me. I'm not a fucking hero like my second mom, or a genius like everybody else in my family. I'm just ordinary, and you're all I've got. I wasn't expecting that. It was so far from what I thought she had meant, and she was so upset that the truth inadvertently came out. My friend is dead. Amina was startled, staring blankly at me. She asked, "What friend?" "Somebody on the survey." I couldn't stop now. "No, this transport, this bot pilot. It was my friend and it's dead. I think it's dead. I don't see how it would have let this happen if it wasn't dead." Wow, that did not sound rational. Amina's expression did something complicated. She took a step toward me. I backed up a step. She stopped, held up her hands palm out, and said in a softer voice, "Hey, I think you need to sit down." Now she was talking to me like I was a hysterical human. Worse, I was acting like a hysterical human. I don't have time to sit down. When I was owned by the company, I wasn't allowed to sit down. Now humans keep wanting me to sit down. I have a lot of code to write so I can hack the target control system. Amina started to reach out for me, and then pulled her hand back when I stepped away again. "But I think you're emotionally compromised right now." That was so completely not true. Stupid humans. Sure, I'd had an emotional breakdown with the whole evisceration thing, but I was fine now despite the drop in performance reliability. Absolutely fine, and I had to kill the rest of the targets in the extremely painful ways I'd been visualizing. I needed to check Scout 1's data to see if I could tell where we were going in the wormhole and how long it would take us to get there. And it occurred to me there might not be a destination if whatever was controlling Art's functions knew I'd killed 3 targets and had decided to revenge them by trapping us in the wormhole forever. I said, "I am not. You're emotionally compromised. I know." But at the time it seemed like a relevant comeback. Amina, like a rational person, ignored it. She said persuasively, "Won't it be easier to write code if you sit down?" I still wanted to argue, but maybe I did want to sit down. I sat down on the floor and cautiously tuned up my pain sensors. Oh, yeah, that hurt. Amina knelt down in front of me, angling her head so she could see my face. This did not help. She said, "I know you don't eat, but is there anything I can get you, like something from the kit, or a blanket?" I covered my face. "No, right. So, say, just theoretically, I was emotionally compromised. A recharge cycle, which I actually didn't need right now, wasn't going to help with that. So what would help with that? Taking over target control system and hurting it very, very badly. That's what would help with that." My drone view showed Amina getting up and pacing slowly across the room, her shoulders drooping. Then, on the platform, Aletra stirred and made bleary noises. Amina hurried over to her, saying, "Hey, it's all right." "You're okay." Aletra blinked and peered up at her. She managed to say, "What happened? Is Ross all right?" Amina leaned against the platform, and from the high angle, she looked older, with lines on either side of her mouth. Keeping her voice low, she said, "I'm sorry. He died. You had these strange implants in your back that were hurting you, and has killed him. We had to take yours out and it almost killed you. Did you know they were there?" Aletra looked baffled. "What? No, that's... I don't understand. I checked my penetration testing, but there were no results. That was annoying. If a system won't communicate with me, I can't get inside it." An apparently target control system was operating as a single system. Stations and installations use multiple systems that work with each other as a safety feature. Safety is relative. I usually went in through a security system function and used it to get to all the others. Technically, I am a security system, so it was easy to get other security systems to interact with me or to confuse them into thinking I was already part of them. There are still ways to get into heavily shielded systems or systems with unreadable code or unfamiliar Architecture. I didn't have a lot of time, so I needed to use the most reliable method, get a dumb human user to access the system for me. Ross's implant had ceased functioning, probably having destroyed its own power source to kill him. Electra's implant was still in the emergency kit's little container, where it thought anomalous things removed from humans needed to be stored. It was now covered with a sterile goo, but was still capable of receiving. I dropped my jamming signal. Via Scout 2 in the control area for your target 4 had set the screen device aside on a bench. All the targets were talking, ignoring the control area hatch. They looked agitated and angry. They might have figured out that we weren't locked in the control area finally. I was glad I hadn't had the chance to kill all of them, since there was a possibility now that they might actually come in handy. I had no idea where the target drones were, but logic and threat assessment said they should be congregated up against the hatchways, sealing off my safe zone. That was going to be a problem. I checked on Scout 1's progress, searching through the images of the floating display surfaces it had captured. Lots of shifting diagrams and numbers that might as well have been abstract art as far as I was concerned. These screens were meant to be interpreted through Art's feed, and without it to explain and annotate the data, it was all a mess. Couldn't anything be simple, just for once? I can fly low-atmosphere craft, but nobody ever thought it was remotely rational to give murder bots the modules on piloting transports. Wait, okay. There was a display with a schematic of Art's hull, with a lot of moving wavy patterns around it that probably would make sense if I knew anything about what happens in wormholes. There was a time counter on it, but nothing indicated what it was timing, so not helpful. What would have been helpful was an episode of Rise and Fall of Sanctuary Moon, or World Hoppers, or anything except Med Center Argala. But media would calm me down, and I wanted to stay angry. I couldn't sit here and wait. There had to be something else I could do. I stood up. "Oh, you're up." Amina was sitting on the edge of the platform next to a half-conscious Electra so she could hold her hand. She eyed me dubiously. "Already? I thought you were going to rest. Do these make any sense to you?" I sent her the display images from Art's bridge. Amina blinked rapidly. Their navigation and power information, like from a pilot station. She took in my expression and waved a hand in exasperation. "Well, if you knew that, why didn't you say so?" "Fine, that one was on me. They're from my drone sealed in the control area. Do you know how to read them?" Amina squinted at nothing again, but slowly shook her head and groaned under her breath. She glanced down at Electra, who was unconscious again, and carefully untangled their hands. From what she said, I doubt she was on the bridge crew. Then she lifted her brows. "Do you know if there's an O station in engineering?" "I didn't know that. An O station, it's like an extra monitoring station for the engineering crew. You can't take control of the bridge unless the command pilot transfers the helm. At least you couldn't in the ones I've seen. But you can get displays for the rest of the ship systems. We have them on some of our ships, but I don't know how common they are." She admitted, "We might have them because our ships are an older design. It wasn't the kind of thing that would be needed on a bot-piloted transport, but it couldn't hurt to check." My performance reliability had leveled out at 89%. Not great, but I could work with it. I still hadn't identified the source of the drop. I'd taken multiple projectile hits without having that kind of steady drop. I took Ross's energy weapon out of my jacket pocket and set it on the bench. "Keep this just in case. It's not going to work on the target drones, but it should work on the targets." I hate giving weapons to humans, but I couldn't leave her without something. "I'll go to engineering. Hold it. Wait." Amina hopped off the platform. "I want to go with you." I had a confusing series of reactions to this, not in order. 1. Exasperation. At her. At myself. 2. Habitual suspicion. On my contracts for the company, the clingy clients were the ones most likely to A. Get me shot, B. Advocate loudly for abandoning the damaged sec unit because it would take too long to load me in the transport, and humans wonder why I have trust issues. 3. Overwhelming urge to kill anything that even thought about threatening her. Someone has to stay here with the injured human, she grimaced. Right, sorry. Then she looked away and rubbed her eyes. And I'd made her cry. Good job, murder bot. I knew I'd been an asshole, and I owed Amina an apology. I'd attribute it to the performance, reliability drop, and the emotional breakdown, which I am provisionally conceding as ongoing rather than an isolated event that I am totally over now, and being involuntarily shut down and restarted. But I can also be kind of an asshole. Kind of equals in the 70% to 80% range. I didn't know what to say, but I didn't have time to do a search for relevant apology examples, and it's not like I ever find any relevant examples that I actually want to use. I said, I'm sorry for being an asshole. That made Amina make a noise like she was trying to express her sinuses, and then she covered her face. No, I mean, it's all right. I haven't exactly been nice to you, so we're probably even. I'm going now, right now. Right now. I was at the hatch when she said, just don't stop talking to me on the feed. I said, I won't. Help me. File, excerpt 2. Section from interview Bharadwaj, 09-57394. I noticed a thing about your transcript. Was the font wrong? No, the font was lovely. But whenever the company is mentioned, you edit out the company and change it to the company. Check session recording. In fact, you've just done it now. That's not a question. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to. Pause. Is it the logos? You've mentioned them before. I did think at the time that you wouldn't have known they were impossible to remove if you hadn't already tried. That's one of the reasons. We've talked a little about trauma recovery treatments. I wonder if you've ever thought about taking one yourself. Session redacted. Chapter 7. I gave Amina a view of what I was doing via my main video input, so she would know I was still there and I didn't have to think what to say to her. Also, if there was an engineering O station and it showed we were trapped forever, then she could see it for herself and I wouldn't have to tell her. As I went down the corridor, Amina said, "Why is the vid so jumpy? Is it from a drone?" "It's from my eyes, oh." I'd left the task group of 8 drones with her, and I could see her via their cameras. She sat on the platform next to Elettra, elbow propped on her knee. "This is creepy," she said. I was passing a lounge attached to the galley, with blue padded couches along the walls. 3 cups with Arts University logo sat on a low table, and a gray jacket, one of the kinds humans wore for exercise, was draped over the back of a chair. The way everything looked so normal, like somebody could walk in any second. She wasn't wrong. Except for those few cabins in the living quarters, I hadn't seen any areas that were trashed or where it looked like a struggle had occurred. Is there anything about this situation that isn't creepy? Huh, she replied. If I think of something, I'll mention it. I reached the sealed hatch that accessed the passage to the engineering module, then had to work on the panel to bypass the damage I'd done to delay anyone opening it from the other side. Breaking the safe zone I'd established might not be a great idea, but my sentry drones on the other 2 sealed hatches had registered no activity. So, as a calculated risk, it wasn't nearly as dumb as some other things I could think of, and the targets in the control area foyer still hadn't picked up the screen device, and I couldn't sit around and wait for them to get off their asses. Right, I could, but I wasn't going to. Amina said, "Everybody in the survey team must be really worried about us." I'm not glad you got caught too, but if I was here alone, it would have been really bad. My uncle Tiago is probably relieved that at least you're with me. The hatch opened onto an empty corridor. No target drones. I sealed it again, and left a sentry drone on this side to alert me if anything tampered with it. Then I sent the rest of my cloud ahead, down the corridor. I knew Amina was trying to compliment me, but it was strange that her view of Tiago's opinion of me was so different from the objective reality. Your Uncle Tiago doesn't trust me. Not that I was upset about that or cared about it at all. She made a snorting noise that came through the feed in my drone audio. Sure he does. You saved him from those people who attacked the facility. That was beside the point. I'd saved a lot of humans, and the number who had trusted or noticed me as anything other than an appliance attached to hub system afterward was statistically insignificant. He didn't like the way I did it. She sighed and rubbed at a dark stain on her shoe. He's still getting over what happened with second mom getting abducted after her survey. Things like that don't happen on preservation. It was a big shock, and maybe he's a little jealous. She can talk to you about what happened to her, but she can't talk to us. Mensa had said that too. I didn't understand why they wanted her to talk about it. Couldn't they just read the report? That's not what we talk about most of the time. Amina hesitated. They wouldn't really have killed her. They couldn't get away with that. That sounds incredibly naive, but Amina and Tiago and the rest of Mensa's family and 99+% of preservation's population still didn't know about the other assassination attempt. If Grey Chris had managed to cut a deal with the company, they would have taken the ransom from preservation and killed her, Pinley, Rathi, and Jarathan, and no one would have been able to do anything about it. My scout drones encountered a closed safety hatch into the main engineering module section. This was a good sign. If the target drones had been circulating through here, it would have been open. I reached it and hit the manual release. As soon as the hatch started to slide upward, I sent my drone cloud under the gap, directing it to spread out into the corridor ahead. No lost contacts, and their cameras and scans detected no movement. So far, so good, though I was picking up a vibration just on the edge of my perceptible range. Maybe it was normal. I hadn't spent any time here when I traveled with Art before. My drone cloud didn't encounter any target drones as it followed the circular corridor around to the engine control access, which was a relief. The last thing I needed was to be whacked into an involuntary restart again. Figuring out a countermeasure for the stealth material on the target drones and on the target's helmets was on the long list of stuff I needed to do so we could survive. But none of the things on the list would matter much if the target control system had sent us into the wormhole with no destination. I'd seen shows about humans and augmented humans trapped in wormholes indefinitely. They ranged from bleakly depressing due to an excess of realism to highly unlikely due to an excess of optimism. At least the humans in the shows knew they were on a potentially endless trip, and not just a long one. I hadn't seen any sign of damage or disturbance up to this point, but then I came around the curve into a foyer where quiescent display surfaces floated along the walls above specialized control interfaces. The weird thing was that the stations were active, though in standby mode, and not shut down. Even I knew you didn't mess with the engines while they were actually making the transport go. These stations would be for fine-tuning or altering, or something, which should only be done while the transport was in dock. Also, one station chair was twisted around to face the entrance, and near it, one of Art's repair drones lay smashed on the deck. My drones are tiny intel drones, but most of Art's were larger with multiple arms and physical interfaces, so they could perform maintenance and other specialized tasks. This drone had 6 of its spidery arms deployed when something had knocked it out of the air, and it was splayed and flattened to the deck like something had stepped on it. I wanted to pick it up and have any motion over it like a stupid human, but I smelled growth medium again. Amina said, "This is such a different setup." from the ships I've seen. Can you look for a display somewhere with double quotes? Oh, I had a bad feeling about this. I followed the smell. It led me through the next hatch and down a short gravity well where blinking caution markers floated in the air. The gist was that various component manufactories and shipwrights and the University of Mahira and New Tideland did not want you to come down here without a Class Master Engineering license or local jurisdictional equivalent, and if you felt you just had to, then really don't fucking touch anything. Amina had stopped talking, and her assigned drone camera showed her squinting in concentration as she watched the scene through my eyes. At the bottom of the gravity well, there was a platform where I could look down through the transparent shielding bubble over the engines. Confession, I didn't know what the engines were supposed to look like. Exactly. I'd never had to guard a transport's engines, and they were usually too boring to show on the entertainment media. But I knew whatever was down there wasn't supposed to have a large organic mass on top of it that smelled of algae and growth medium. Amina said softly, What what is that? Believe me, it was the question occupying 92% of my attention right now. Organic neural tissue can be melded with inorganic systems. Example A, the squishy bits inside my skull. So there was an outside chance, it was so outside I couldn't estimate a percentage, that this organic mass was a normal part of our systems, maybe something unique and proprietary. But then why did it smell like the targets? I got an alert from Scout 2 in the control area foyer. I checked its input and saw Target 5 stride over and pick up the screen device where it lay on a chair. Why the hell? Does everything have to happen at once? But at least the freaky thing on Art's engines wasn't trying to crawl up here and kill us yet. As Target 5 tapped his fingers on the solid state screen, I widened my input range to pick up any active channel. Into 0.3 seconds, I caught a data transmission. More importantly, 0.2 seconds later, I caught Target Control System's response, "Got you, you piece of shit." But something about the view from Scout bothered me. It had been bothering me for a while, but I had been too agitated to pay attention. A lot of my ability to do threat assessment, like pick potential hostiles out of crowds or tell which stupid boat is full of raiders instead of curious locals, is based on pattern matching off a database of human behaviors. The targets were anomalous, but they weren't so anomalous they didn't exhibit the same basic types of behaviors as other humans, and something was off about their behavior in the control area foyer, something that couldn't be accounted for by their overconfidence or the fact that they were allish holes. Scout 2 watched the targets waiting impatiently, standing around the control area foyer as Target 5 tapped at the screen, standing. Even after they had apparently realized that the noise from the sealed control area was a decoy, after their security update made them much less vulnerable to drone attacks, they had stood around and waited. Sec units weren't allowed to sit down ever, but humans and augmented humans did it every chance they had. They hadn't tried to search for us. They had stayed in the foyer, sending their target drones into the surrounding corridors, but no further. We were hostiles trapped in an enclosed space with them, moving through it at will as far as they knew. Why weren't they trying to protect themselves by making their own safe zone? Why hadn't they at least found a compartment to lock themselves in? Were they relying completely on the target drones? Or were they waiting for outside help because they knew they hadn't long to wait? They hadn't even bothered to sit down. It's not like I didn't already think the situation was really fucking bad, but I was beginning to think it was way fucking worse. Wormhole travel takes multiple cycles. The trip from our survey site back to preservation had taken for preservation standard cycles, which were defined as 28 preservation standard hours each. And it was considered a short trip just to the edge of preservation territory. There was no way we could be at our destination yet, or any destination yet. I tapped Scout 1, locked up in Art's control area, and told it to look again at that display that showed Art's hull, the wave patterns, and the time countdown. Scout 1 zipped back up to that console. The countdown was at 2 minutes, 14 seconds. Oh, yeah, this is an issue. I forwarded the input to Amina. Amina's drone squad watched, her eyes narrow in disbelief. That really looks like it's counting down to a wormhole exit, but that can't be right. I was somewhat desperate for it not to be right. Wake Elettra and ask her how long the ship was in the wormhole, how long it took them to get from the system where they were captured to preservation territory. Amina scooted around to touch Elettra's shoulder. After long seconds, Elettra stirred. Amina asked the question. Elettra blinked, more aware, and her expression turned puzzled. We never left the system. We've been here the whole time. No, you came through a wormhole to preservation where we were captured. Now we're going somewhere else. Remember, the gray person said we were in the bridge transit. Amina tried to persist, but Elettra's eyelids were drooping, and she didn't respond. Amina said to me, she's still really confused. Earlier, they both thought we'd been captured before they were, and they didn't believe me when I tried to tell them we weren't. I told her, this thing on the engine housing is an alien remnant. I think it's taking us through the wormhole at a much faster rate, much faster. Not hours instead of cycles, but minutes instead of cycles. Art's engines had been compromised by a device that was using the wormhole in a completely different way, allowing travel faster than any transport technology that I'd seen in media or heard about on the news feeds, faster than any human transport technology. I think we're about to come out into normal space. Amina shook her head. No, that's bonkers. The timer must be damaged. We've only been in the wormhole for a few hours. We can't be anywhere yet. The closest inhabited system outside preservation territory is 15 days from station at least. And then the engines made a noise somewhere between a groan and a clunk. A new display sprung up in front of Scout 1, a view of normal space. We had just come out of the wormhole. Amina froze, staring at the feed view of the new display. Her eyes widened in alarm. Then she said, "What should we do?" That was a really good question. That my first thought was to try to destroy the alien remnant. Fortunately, instead of doing that, I went on to the next thought. I don't know anything about transport engines, but I know you shouldn't shoot at them, okay? They're near the top of the long list of things it's just obviously not a good idea to shoot at. I needed more intel before I could do anything about this. I didn't like the idea of saying I don't know to Amina, because humans panic, and I almost don't blame them, because right now I feel like panicking, and I was not in control of this situation, and I could see at least 10 instances now where I'd made wrong decisions. And being in control of the situation was really important, because otherwise it was in control of me, and that felt like a short step to being back in the company's control. And maybe I just had to trust Amina, who had tackled a much larger human, because she had thought she needed to save me. I told her, I don't know. Amina sat up straight, biting her lip. Then she whispered to herself, all right. Let's think. On the feed, sounding much calmer than she looked, she said, can you make that drone in the control area move around? If we can see a display that will tell us where we are, or if there's a station or someplace we can try to send a distress signal ... double quotes, that wasn't a bad idea. I exited the platform and went back up through the gravity well, telling Scout 1 to do a sweep of any active display surfaces. As its input filled with images, I pulled my archived video of its previous survey and ran a comparison. I was able to isolate 5 displays with significant changes. I enlarged them and set the images up in our feed so we could page through them. This one, Amina said immediately. This is local navigation. There's info on the star. It doesn't say if we're close to the station or if there's a station at all. I reached the monitoring area with its poor, dead repair drone. I could see the display Amina was interpreting, but I'd found another diagram of art on a new display. An indicator showed something attached to the outside of Art's hull on its lab module. Looking at the specifications ... For fuck's sake, it couldn't be. I'd shut off our comm because I didn't want the targets using it to track us. Plus, it wasn't like anybody could contact us while we were in the wormhole. I reactivated it and checked the channel our survey had used. It was active. Yeah, this was happening. I pinged the channel and got an immediate response and transferred it to our feed relay. Amina clapped a hand to her head in shock. "What?" A familiar voice said, "Sec unit, Amina, can you hear me?" It was Arata. Amina gasped. "Oh, we're here. Where are you?" Arata said, "We're in the facility safe pod attached to the hull of the Raider ship. You're on board, correct? We saw you pulled toward the airlock. Sometimes I wonder what the point of it all is. They were supposed to be safe on the base ship, arriving at Preservation Station by now." I said, "Who's we, Sec Unit?" Arata said, clearly happy to hear from me. "Oh, Overseer is here, and Tiago and Roddy. We weren't able to reach the base ship after jettison, and were dragged into the wormhole with the attacker. Should we try to get to you?" Amina asked. She hopped off Electra's gurney and bounced on her toes. "We've got an injured person with us." Arata said hastily, No. The pod's damaged. We didn't expect ... double quote someone in the background. Probably. Oversay yelled something urgent, but it was muffled, and I'd have to analyze the audio to understand it. Arata changed whatever she was about to say to, "What's your situation there?" "Oh, there was a lot Arata wasn't telling us, but I was estimating a 70% chance that if we hadn't exited the wormhole so absurdly early, Arata and the others wouldn't have survived much longer. So now I had for more humans to worry about." Fantastic. Amina was giving Arata a rapid, but somewhat garbled report on all the fun we'd been having and warning her about the targets. The targets couldn't be alien, could they? No, that wasn't possible. Aliens couldn't look that much like humans, could they? I sent Arata a schematic of the outside of Art's hull with the airlock in our safe zone highlighted. "Arata, can you get to this lock?" There was a pause which told me that their situation was even worse than Arata was implying. I estimated the hesitation was just long enough for her to check the air reserves in the evac suits they were probably already wearing due to damage to the pod. And then Arata said firmly, "Yes, we can make that." "Eta, say, 3 minutes. I'll meet you there," I told her, and started out of the engineering monitoring area. I should have at least 2.5 spare minutes, so I went ahead with the hack of target control system. The thing that had protected it so far was the fact that it didn't interact with the feed or with interfaces the way every other system I'd ever encountered had. But Target 5 had accessed target control system and been responded to, so that told me what channel to concentrate on and what kind of transmissions it would accept. And it also told me I was going to need to go old school to break this fucker. I tossed together a code bundle that duplicated the signal sent by the target screen device, copied it 100 times, made it self-replicating so all my copies were copying themselves, then sent the whole thing to target control system. Art would have laughed at an attack like that. Actually, Art would have laughed at the part where it sent back a code bundle that would have eaten my face. But I had a theory that the reason the targets weren't trying to access most of Art's systems was that their target control system lacked the ability to effectively use Art's architecture. Then I got an alert from a sentry drone. It was on the hatch into the quarters module, the first hatch I'd sealed to create our safe zone. It couldn't get a visual of any target drones, but an energy buildup near the hatch indicated a weapon or tool was being used on the controls. Oh, I started to run, following the curving corridor back out. Of the engineering module, I checked Scout 2 in the control area foyer just in time to see targets 5 and 6 race out of its camera range. When I said everything kept happening at once, it had mostly been an exaggeration, but now everything was actually happening at once. Something must have alerted them to the safe pod on the hull. I had an option, but it was a terrible idea. But it was also the only way to get Arata and the others inside. In time, Amina, our safe zone is about to be compromised, and I need to deal with it. Can you get to the airlock to cycle Arata and the others in? I was assuming target control system wasn't going to be cooperative about admitting visitors. Plus, it was a little busy right now. Amina had been pacing medical, anxiously listening in on the hurried conversation in the safe pod as they prepared to abandon it. She stopped, muted her calm, and said, "Yes, can you give me a map?" I sent her our safe zone map with the fastest route to the airlock highlighted. "You'll have your squad of drones ahead of you. I'll send an alert and another route if they encounter anything." Understood. She started for the door, then stopped to pick up the target's energy weapon and tuck it into her jacket pocket. Then she dodged sideways and grabbed a container out of the pile of supplies on the bench. To enlarge the image to see what she'd taken, but I had intel coming in from the sentry drone that the safe zone hatch had just been breached. At the engineering module exit, I took a different route, through the hatchway, into the cargo handling station, and out to the corridor that ran down the outside of the central module toward the quarters hatch. If I couldn't get in front of them, I had to come up from behind. There were 3 possible reasons the targets might have acted now. 1. They had received intel from target control system that the safe pod was on the outside of the hull and interpreted its presence as an attack. 2. Now that we'd left the wormhole and were presumably at our destination, they knew their reinforcements would be coming soon and felt it was now relatively safe to attack us. Or 3. They were expecting a supervisor to arrive at any moment and wanted to look proactive. With my luck, it was a combination of all 3. My drones zipping ahead of me, I reached the far end of the central module and ducked through to connecting corridors. I lost 3 drone contacts as they reached the passage to the quarters hatch, but I didn't slow down. I'd gone low in the last 2 encounters, and with combat drones, even weird unfamiliar ones, it was best to assume there was an active learning component. So I accelerated, and as I rounded the corner, I ran up the bulkhead. 2 target drones waited for me near the deck, and I landed on one before it could change position. I smashed the second as it jolted toward my head. The hatch had been cut open, the locks drilled and partially melted. I ordered my drones to drop back. I hadn't had time to work on countermeasures for the target's protective suits, and I knew I was going to regret that. I lost one of Amina's drone contacts and sent her an alert. She was in a corridor near a junction she would have to cross to get to the airlock, and there was no alternate route. I told her, "Go back to medical, no time," Amina said, and stepped back to press herself against the bulkhead. "I think something's wrong with the safe pod." I could have argued about that, but there wasn't time, and she was right. And I'd finally gotten a view of the container she'd taken from the emergency supplies, the one she was currently holding clutched to her chest. It was the fire suppressor Ras had pointed out. I slammed through the connecting passage and out into the next corridor. Targets 5 and 6 spun to face me, pointed their clunky square energy weapons at me, for target drones hovered beside them. 2 turns beyond was the junction Amina needed to pass through, so I needed to A. keep them here, or B. kill them. Let's go with option B. Amina's drones clustered protectively around her as she hit the release on the fire suppressor. The chemical blast shot out and Amina hit what she aimed at, because suddenly my drones could see the approaching target drone. The burst of chemical wash had coated the target drone's casing and disrupted the camouflage. File under Save for later. This confirms that camouflage is a physical effect, something in the design. Visible on their casing, not an unknown type of transmitted interference. The target drone wavered sideways, then lurched down the corridor, probably with its propulsion and sensors damaged. Amina ducked around the corner and sprinted toward the junction. Staring at me, Target 5 said something in that language with no translation. Target 6 made a dismissive gesture and started to turn back toward the foyer. I absolutely had to keep them away. As Target 5 lifted his weapon and the target drone shot forward, I moved. My drones couldn't see the target drones due to the stealth material, but I could. I pulled an estimate of the coordinates from my scan and sent a drone toward each target drone with orders to make surface contact. One overshot and had to loop back, but all for managed a landing. With the contact drones for a reference, the rest of my drones could approximate the target drones' positions. As the target drones reached me, I told my drones to attack at will. While this was going on and Target 5 was lifting his weapon, I ducked and dove forward. The first blast went over my head. Then a target drone banged into my shoulder and knocked me into the bulkhead. Then a thing happened. The calm, hidden in the pocket under my ribs, the calm Art had given me when I left it on Ravi Hyrul's transit ring, pinged my internal feed with a message. It was a compressed packet, a type meant to be sent in system, not carried via transports through wormholes, which meant it had originated with Art's internal calm array. It was tagged with the name Eden. My drones hauled the target drones, but the third already had a fix on me. It tried to slam me in the head, but it had to back up first to build up speed, which gave me a chance to grab it. I shoved it sideways in. Time to block a blast from Target 5's energy weapon. Heat blasted over the target drone, which was a factor I hadn't anticipated. This was different from the weapon dead target had used on me. Instead of just being a pain-causing annoyance, this blast was meant to destroy tissue and incapacitate permanently. Even with the target drone between us, my hands took damage. 3 of my drones got caught in the blast and dropped to the deck. Eden was the name I used on Ravi Hyrul when Art had helped me. This had to be a trick, except that target control system was drowning in the code bundles I'd sent. It shouldn't have the ability to send me a packet now, but something on board Art had sent it. I started an analysis of the transmission. I kept hold of the target drone and used my feet to shove off the wall, swung my body around on the deck, and hit Target 5's legs with my legs. He fell sideways into the bulkhead, then down to the deck. I couldn't get up yet, but at least we were both down here now. On the channel where I'd been following Amina's progress, I saw she had passed through the foyer and on into the corridor beyond and found the airlock. She was breathing hard and sweating as she tapped the cycle command on the pad. "I hope this is right," she muttered to my drones hovering around her. Then the warning. Lights flashed, a sign that the outer lock had received the command and was preparing to open. Yes, Amina waved her arms and did a little dance. My analysis of the packet finished and I checked the results. No killware or malware detected, and the file type indicated it was a video clip. It also indicated that it was a delayed message, sent some time earlier, but trapped when Art's feed and com had gone down. The fact that a message stuck in the com store and forward buffer had finally been delivered meant that as target control system failed, some of Art's more complex systems were beginning to restart. It could still be a trick. It was exactly the kind of tricky shit SEC units could do, and I knew so many ways someone could use an intense visual stimulus to temporarily trash my scan, visual sensors, neural tissue, etc. But I had to play it. Maybe I was desperate for some. Art was still here somewhere, but the fact that it was a video clip felt like a communication method only someone who knew me would choose. I played it. Target 6 ran up and aimed his energy weapon at me, but I let go of the target drone and pulled Target 5 on top of me. With all the flailing and screaming going on, Target 5 not me. Target 6 couldn't get a clear shot. I was firing both the energy weapons in my arms, but the targets' protective suits seemed to be deflecting the bolts, at least to some extent. With all the screaming, it was hard to tell. Another target drone swung in, but my surviving drones slammed it sideways and it hit Target 6's helmet. There was a lot going on, but I really needed to get off the floor. Amina and her drones scrambled back as the airlock cycled open and Arata, Oversay, Roddy, and Tiago stumbled out. Roddy went down in a heap of singed evac suit. I couldn't tell if he'd been hurt or had just tripped on the lock's raised seal. Then Tiago staggered sideways and Oversay caught his arm, and I knew my first theory had been correct and that the safe pod had taken extensive damage. The compressed video clip in the packet was from the serial World Hoppers, from a story arc climax episode when a secondary main character's mind had been taken over by a sentient brain virus, I know, and the story was really much better than it sounds, but it was the moment when the character said, "I am trapped in my own body. I really needed to get up to Art's Bridge. I really needed to keep Targets 5 and 6 and their drones away from my humans, who were unhelpfully still wandering around in the airlock foyer exclaiming at each other, and I had to do both at once. I got my knees up, lifted and threw Target 5 at Target 6. They both fell backward and I rolled to my feet. A damaged target drone slammed through what was left of my drone cloud. It clipped my shoulder as I threw myself back toward the quarters module hatch. I needed to make sure both targets followed me, so I yelled, "I'm going to blow up the transport and kill all of you, you pieces of shit." It was lame, but I was in a hurry. As I ran, the targets yelled in response, high-pitched, furious, and incomprehensible. A damaged drone managed a last set of images, verifying that both targets charged after me. I headed up the corridor toward the control area. That was the point where I realized I hadn't discontinued the channel I was using to send my visual input to Amina. She probably hadn't been able to pay attention to it since she had left medical. Humans, even augmented humans, can't process multiple inputs like I can, but it was still playing in her feed. Her drone escort showed her standing in the airlock foyer. Still, what the hell? With Arata, while Oversay and Tiago dragged Roddy out of his damaged evac suit. Arata had her suit half off and looked frazzled and, to put it mildly, concerned. On my feed, Amina shouted repeatedly, "Where are you going? What is happening?" Under the circumstances, they were reasonable questions. "Get to medical," I told her. I didn't want to answer any reasonable questions. If I was wrong, I'd probably be dead, and that was bad enough. Being stupid and dead would just be that much worse. But what? Amina began, and I backburnered the channel. Chapter 8. Running through Art's corridors, I didn't have a lot of time to plan. The way the Med Systems platform had activated in response to Electra's medical emergency told me the ship's operational code, or at least large fragments of it, was still intact, and target control system was going down under my barrage of contacts, allowing more of Art's systems to come back online. This was technically a good time to try to breach the control area, but I'd be doing it even if I had to fight through an entire task group of targets and their stupid semi-invisible drones. I took the corridor up through the central module and past a target drone bobbing in midair and one bumping along the lower bulkhead. As target control system went down, it was flooding them with garbage code. Back in the corridor's module, Amina and the others were finally clumping down the corridor toward medical. They encountered the target drone that Amina had disabled with fire suppressant, still floating aimlessly, and Oversay bashed it with a cutting tool brought from the safe pod. Scout 2 showed me the control area foyer. Barely 3 meters ahead was empty, which meant I'd lost track of Target 4. I just had time to run back its video to see Target 4 leave through the forward doorway. Then an energy heat blast hit me from behind. It struck me in the lower back, and I lost traction and fell forward and slid halfway across the deck toward the control area hatch. My performance reliability dropped to 80%. In the corridor outside medical, Amina jerked to a halt and yelled, "No, no." "What?" Arata demanded. "They got ... they shot ... double quotes." Amina waved wildly at the medical hatch. "Stay here with them," and bolted away. Her drone squad careened after her. I've been hit by projectile and energy weapons a lot more times than I can remember, literally, because of the memory wipes. And it's not that it doesn't hurt, but I had tuned down my pain sensors earlier, so it was a surprise when I rolled over and saw the big smear of blood and fluid on the deck. I could only last so long like this. I needed to move faster. But at least this solved the problem of how I was going to get the hatch open. Target 4 ran toward me because Ashholes love to see your face when they kill you. He stopped what he thought was far enough away and fired, but I rolled onto my side so the blast hit the deck next to me. I shoved with my feet, used my hip as a pivot, and spun myself around so I could grab his ankle. He shrieked and fell backward, and I climbed up him and snapped his neck. Targets 5 and 6 were almost here, and I only had 3 drones left in the corridor. As I shoved to my feet and took for his energy weapon, I ordered my surviving drones to run interference for me and take hits if they could. Between the stealth material helmets and the protective suits, the drones didn't have much chance of kill strikes, but hopefully they provide a distraction. Hefting the big, square weapon was hard, and I knew I'd lost a lot of muscle and underlying support structure in my back. With my free hand, I popped the panel beside the control area hatch, and then fired a short burst at the mechanism inside. The blast of heat convinced the sensors that the ship was experiencing an emergency condition. The sensors weren't wrong about that. And it reactivated the manual controls. I hit the manual release, and the hatch slid open. I stepped through and hit the close and seal sequence. One of my drones managed a shoulder hit on Target 5, but the other contacts disappeared. As the hatch slid closed, I knew I didn't have long. I'd had no time to replace the outside hatch panel, and while I had some strong evidence to suggest that what the targets lacked in personality, they also lacked in brains, they were sure to try shooting at the controls, and sooner or later, it would work. I'd cut Amina's visual access to my feed, but her drones told me that Arata and Tiago ran after her through the corridors headed here. Yeah, I probably should have cut Amina's input before this, but I'd wanted her to know what my status was if I couldn't respond. Scout 2 was still in the foyer on sentry, so I sent its video to Amina's feed so she'd be able to see where the targets were. I saw her slide to a stop and clutch her head, trying to focus on the new input. I was already stepping past the messily dead targets 1 and 3 and climbing the stairs to the upper control area, and I didn't have time to help her. Scout 1 was there, still monitoring displays. It greeted me with a ping as I set the energy weapon down in the nearest station chair. I needed an interface with the ship's data storage, the bond company that used to own me. Made a lot of its gigantic piles of currency by data mining its customers. That's recording everything everyone says and then going through it for information that could be sold. Part of my job had been to help record and parse and protect that information until it could be transferred back to the company. And if I didn't do it in a timely manner, indicating complete obedience, I got punished by my governor module, which was like being shot by a high-grade energy weapon only from the inside out. The raw audio and feed streams make for huge data files, and they had to be moved around a lot and often got saved to unused storage areas on other systems. This is also a way to destroy data. If you don't completely hate your clients, or you're feeling particularly disgusted at the company at any one particular moment, or you've hacked your governor module and need to cover your tracks, you can move data into the buffer of the SEX system right before it's due for an update. The files are overwritten, and it looks like an accident. But my point is, art was a big transport with a lot of interactive processes and systems working in concert, which meant there were a lot of storage spaces that would not be obvious to human intruders, or to hostile operating systems like Target Control System that seemed unable to use most of the architecture, storage spaces where you could save a compressed backup copy of a kernel. Possibly your own kernel if you were an advanced sentient control system who was very smart and very sneaky. I still couldn't make feed connections with any of the operating stations, so I tapped the pad below the display surface that looked the most like an internal systems monitor. The display floated upward and opened into an array of small data sources. Taking in information visually rather than through the feed felt horribly slow. I pulled up the manual interface and then had to pull the non-corporate standard coding language out of my archive and load it into my internal processor. I got my query constructed and then flicked through the floating interfaces to get it loaded. After a subjective eternity that was actually 1.2 seconds long, the system started to display the data storage areas. Currently holding large and possibly anomalous files with structures that didn't match the protocol for the area where they were stored. I had been betting on the procedural storage for the MED platform, but the first possibility my query turned up was in the galley, in a data storage area hidden in a layer under the usual space for food production formulas. But when I searched on it, it read as empty. You know, I really don't have time for this. A loose chunk from my back was sliding down in the station chair, and it was hard to hold myself upright. I was leaking a lot, and I hate leaking. I checked my target control system channel just for the satisfaction, and saw multiple failure indicators through my barrage of contacts. Yeah, don't let the hatch close on you on your way down, fucker. Scout 2 in the control area foyer sent me video of targets 5 and 6 banging away at the open panel beside the hatch. In a corridor just out of sight of the foyer, Amina's drone group showed me her, Arata, and Tiago having a tense whispered conversation. Amina waved the fire suppressant container urgently, and Arata had the captured energy weapon. It was exasperating. Amina, get out of there. You know these people are dangerous. She flinched and grimaced. Where are you? I can't see what you're doing anymore. Are you all right? Sort of. Not really. I just have to do this one thing. I didn't feel so good, and it was hard figuring out the language to expand the query's search. I ran it again, and again it turned up the food production data storage reserved space. Target control system went down, my contacts pinging an empty void. I didn't discontinue my code attack just in case it was a trick. The query wasn't faulty. There was something in the food production data. Storage, no matter how firmly the reader said it was empty. The display station feeds were starting to come back online, so I could access their functions directly via my feed interface, which was a huge relief. I initiated a deep analysis scan of the reserved space in the food production storage and immediately hit a request for a passcode. Well, shit, in the corridor, Amina whispered to Arata, I think it's dying. Arata took the fire suppressant away from Amina and handed it to Tiago. She told him, be ready. If this was really what I thought it was, the video clip was a clue. I replayed it into the request field and got no response. I ran a quick list of all the character, ship, and place names from world hoppers. No response and no time. Eden. The clip had been directed to Eden, a fake name I'd used for human clients, a name Art had never called me. My name, my real name. is private, but the name Art called me wasn't something humans could say or even access. It was my local feed address hard-coded into the interfaces laced through my brain. It was worth a shot, I guess. I submitted it to the request field. It was accepted, and the storage space opened to reveal a large compressed file. Attached to it was a short instruction document with a few lines of complex code I couldn't parse, but the instructions were clear. They said, "In case of emergency, run." I pulled the code into the operating station's processing area and ran it. All the lights in the control area went dark, then blinked back to life. Simultaneously, all the display surfaces around me flickered, went to blank, then flashed reinitialization graphics, and Art's feed filled the ship. In the pleasant neutral voice that systems use to address humans, it whispered, "Reload in progress. Please stand by." Below, the hatch slid open. The target started to step inside, but Scout 2 saw Tiago run into the foyer, bellowing and spraying fire suppressant at them. Target 5 turned toward Tiago while 6 shoved forward into the control area. Then Arata stepped out from the hatchway and shot Target 5 with the energy weapon, which left Target 6 still armed with a clear shot at Tiago through the open hatchway. I grabbed Target 4's energy weapon and shoved out of the chair, but my legs wouldn't work right. I collapsed, rolled toward the edge of the platform, and shot Target 6. The blasts hit his chest and face, and he staggered back into the bulkhead, then fell over Target 3's sprawled body. Target 5 staggered and swayed, but he pointed his weapon at Arata. Then Art's voice, Art's real voice, filled the feed. It said, "Drop the weapon." Arata dropped her energy weapon, and Tiago dropped the fire suppressant. Both held up empty hands. I told it, "Don't hurt my humans." Target 5 shouted something incoherent, then dropped his weapon and lurched sideways, clutching his head. Oh wow, Art must have been able to access Target 5's helmet via the code used by Target Control System. Target 5 fell over and convulsed once on the deck, then went limp. Tiago started to put his hands down and then reconsidered. He said, "We mean no harm. We are here because we were attacked by that person and others." Arata added, "Who are you?" Art said, "You are aboard the Perihelion, registered teaching and research vessel of the Pan-System University of Mahira and New Tideland." Then it added, "I'm not going to hurt your humans, you little idiot." Arata lifted her brows, startled, and Tiago looked boggled. I said, "You're using the public feed. Everyone can hear you." "So are you," Art said, "and you're leaking on my deck." Amina ran through the hatch, shied away from the pile of dead targets, then ran up the stairs. She dropped to her knees beside me and yelled, "Hey, we need help." "We need to get to medical," Art said. "I can hear you, adolescent human. There's no reason to shout." I've dispatched an emergency gurney. I've always thought that everything Art says sounds sarcastic. If you were a human, I'm guessing it also sounded more than vaguely menacing. Arata stepped into the control area. Tiago was checking to see if Target 5 was alive. He wasn't. Art said, "The intruder is dead." Double quotes. Tiago glanced up at the ceiling. "But who are you? Are you a crew member or double quotes?" Arata reached the top of the stairs and leaned over me, frowning worriedly. She had a cut above her left eyebrow, a first-degree burn on her cheek, and her short hair was singed. She said, "Don't worry, Secunet. We'll get you to medical." She squeezed Amina's shoulder. I guess Amina had never seen a Secunet hit with an energy weapon that caused them to lose 20% of the body mass on their back and expose their internal structure, because she seemed really upset. I was losing all my inputs, but there was one thing I had to say before the gurney got here. "Art," I said aloud, because Art could silence my feed if it wanted to. "You did this. You sent those ishholes to kidnap my humans." "Of course not," Art said. "I sent them to kidnap you. Then my performance reliability bottomed out and shut down. Delayed restart, so that was another catastrophic failure. Physically, that is." I was going to make a joke about catastrophic failures in other contexts for the second half of that sentence, but it just got to depressing, waiting for my memory and archive to come back online. At least I knew I wasn't in a company cubicle. Even with no feed or visual input, I knew that because I was warm, which meant I was in a med system for humans. Once I could access it again, I checked my buffer to see what had happened. Oh, right, art happened. The last conversation I had picked up on feed, ambient audio, was Amina. Her voice, a worried whisper, said, "Are you sure it's going to be all right?" Art, whispering back to her on a closed feed channel, and somehow managing not to sound sarcastic or menacing at all, said, "Completely. The damage to its organic tissue and support structure is easily repaired. Some systems were operating at suboptimal parameters due to repeated energy weapon strikes. The restart should correct that." I said, "Stop talking to my human." Art said, "Make me." I don't know if I tried to make Art stop, but that was when I lost all input again. Now I was at 30% performance reliability and climbing steadily, lying on my side on Art's medical platform. My jacket and deflection vest were gone, and the surgical suite had cut away my shirt to get to the burn parts. I was sticky from all the leaky fluid and blood and parts falling off. Yes, it's just as disgusting as it sounds, but I didn't feel nearly as bad as I had the last time I'd been here when Art had altered my configuration. Art, you manipulative fucker. Whatever was going on, there was nothing I could do about it now, and that just made me more furious. So I watched 5 minutes of episode 174 of Rise and Fall of Sanctuary Moon. Did that work? No, it didn't. Tentatively, I checked my inputs. Tentatively, because I wanted to talk to a human right now about as much as I wanted to lose a couple of limbs and have a conversation about my feelings. The drones I'd assigned to Amina had managed to survive. Following my last instruction to stay with her before they'd lost contact with me, they had adopted a tight circular formation a half-meter above her head. They'd been collecting video the entire time I was out, and I ran it back to see what had happened. I forwarded through the boring parts with Amina being upset because of the homie lying in a pool of steaming blood and fluid thing, and Arata trying to tell her this actually wasn't unusual for me. Then the gurney arriving. It was a medical assistance device designed to either bring casualties to the med system or to carry them off a damaged ship, so its power and functions were autonomous. It was sort of like a big maintenance drone, capable of a certain range of actions, built in the shape of a rack with expandable shelves and arms. How it had survived the purge of Art's other drones, I don't know, unless the targets just hadn't known what it was when it was folded up in its inert state. It zipped in from the foyer, angled itself up the stairs, scooped me onto itself, and clamped me down. I hate being carted around like equipment, even though technically I am actually equipment. As it started back down, Amina tried to follow it, and Arata grabbed her arm, looking up the way humans did when they were trying to talk to something they couldn't see. Arata said, "Hello, your name is Art. Can you tell me if there's anyone else aboard this ship?" Art said, "There's an additional unidentified human in medical, but she appears to be an injured non-combatant. I assume the 2 other humans present there are part of your group. All the intruders are accounted for." Amina wiped her nose. Humans are so disgusting, and said, "That's Elettra. She was a prisoner when we got here. Ross is there too, but he's dead." She pulled away from Arata to follow the gurney down the stairs. Arata, with an expression somewhere between thoughtful and alarmed, trailed after her. Arata said, "Thank you, that's a relief to hear, but can you tell us who you are?" Amina followed the gurney into the foyer. "That's the ship. It's Sec Unit's friend." She threw a glance upward. "That's you, right? You're the transport." Tiago knelt over dead Target 6, turning the helmeted head to see the face. He looked up, startled. "The transport," Art said. Correct. But bot pilots don't talk like this, Tiago said to Arata, keeping his voice low. It can't be a bot. Huh, Arata didn't bother to comment on that. Transport, what happened here? She asked. Why did you attack our survey facility? Art said. I am still reinitializing after a forced shutdown. And, deletion. I have prioritized restoring the med system to full function. Amina's drones caught an image of Arata and Tiago exchanging a brow-lifted look before she followed the gurney. Yeah, I think they had both noticed that Art had deliberately not answered the direct question. Pro tip, when bots do that, it's not a good sign. I had to forward again through all the back and forth of getting me to medical. Arata and Tiago stayed in the control area, and Oversay went to join them, but Amina's drones didn't see a lot of that. She was sitting in medical watching the surgical suite work on me and trying to tell Ratty what had happened. It was confusing with the humans talking on their comms, but I didn't care enough to filter the raw video and separate out the different conversations. The only part that was new was about the safe pod. It had been damaged when they separated from the facility. The decision to clamp onto what at the moment had been a hostile ship hadn't been a voluntary one. The safe pod's guidance system had been damaged and had directed it toward the nearest functional transport before Oversay could stop it. Then we were in the wormhole, and it was too late to escape. By the time we had exited the wormhole, Oversay and Arata had already had to cannibalize for of the evac suits aboard while they were trying to repair the failing life support, and they had estimated that they would last another 17 hours if that. All 4 of the humans needed treatment for toxic air inhalation, plus Ratty had damaged a knee when a gravity fluctuation had slammed him into a bulkhead. At one point, Amina and Tiago had this conversation over the comm. Are you sure you're all right? This was the 4th time he had asked her that, and I was beginning to understand why. She was so annoyed with authority figures all the time. Those people, they didn't hurt you. Uncle, I'm fine. She said that in the normal human adolescent exasperated and borderline whiny tone. That's actually statistically normal for human adults too. Then she hesitated and added, when we got here, they hit Sec Unit with one of those big drone things and knocked it out, and I thought it was dead, and I was alone with them, the corporates. Electra and Ross were there, but they were so scared, and I knew I was in a lot of trouble. Then Sec Unit was just suddenly in the room, and I knew we were going to fight these people, and we were going to win. She leaned her hip against the med platform and folded her arms, tucking her hands up in her armpits like she was cold. Are you sure Sec Unit's going to be all right? The transport said it was, but it looks bad. I'm sure, Tiago told her, sounding all warm and confident. Liar, you're not sure. The others who had seen me in way worse shape than this, they were sure. Do you still have those drones over your head? Why are they there? She glanced up, brow furrowed like she had forgotten them. Sec Unit gave me these when it had to go search the area and make sure there weren't hostiles in our safe zone, sitting on the bench with a wound pack wrapped around his knee. Ratty smiled. That's Sec Unit. I'm glad it kept you safe. Tiago sounded like it just made him more worried. He said, what exactly were you doing? I checked all my video inputs. Scout 1 was still in the control area watching Arata and Oversay, who sat in art station chairs, flicking through its displays. Scout 2 was still in the foyer with a view of Tiago, who had searched Target 6's suit and was trying to get the target screen device to work. Everyone was listening. Amina wiped her face impatiently. We had just found the alien remnant tech on the engines right before we came out of the wormhole into the system. We think that's what let us get here so fast. SEC Unit realized there was something wrong about the story Electra and Ross told us, like they had only been captured a couple of days ago, which wasn't nearly long enough for a trip to preservation from even the nearest. Wormhole. We were trying to figure out what to do about it when we got the signal from you. Alien remnant tech. The look Ratty threw at Electra was suspicious. Her eyes were open now and tracking, though she still looked confused. He had tried to talk to her earlier, but while she had blinked and shifted position occasionally, she hadn't seemed aware of her surroundings. Rady was probably thinking about past evidence of corporations collecting illegal alien materials and how great that had turned out. On the comm, Oversay said, "Is it dangerous? Should we try to remove it from the drive?" On the general feed and comm, audible to the whole ship, Art said, "The foreign device detached from my drive and ceased to function when the invading system was deleted. Further interference is not advisable." That was definitely not menacing. "Oh no, not at all. On a private feed channel to Art, I said, 'You set me up, you fucker.' I was still catching up on archived drone video and 54 seconds behind actual time. So Art ignored me, right? Hear me out." The message packet with the World Hoppers video clip had been sent through Art's internal comm before it went down, presumably not long after Art hid a backup copy of itself, passcode protected by my hard feed address. Art had been expecting me to be aboard at some point to run its emergency code, which would uncompress the backup and reload it into its hardware, which meant it had sent the targets to find me in preservation space and given them the ability to track me via the comm I had stashed in my rib compartment, which meant Art had been conscious and capable of affecting events during the attack on our facility and base ship. Art's sudden and obviously intentionally dramatic reentrance into the general feed and comm conversation had made the humans tense. It startled Electra into awareness. "Who's that?" she asked, looking from Rady to Amina. "It's the transport," Rady told her, watching the ceiling warily. "I don't suppose you could call it a bot pilot. I don't suppose you could," Art said. Listening from the control area, Arata's brows drew together. She asked Oversay, "Could we get a display link to medical?" Art said, "It's better if I do it," and a hollow display of Arata and Oversay in the control area blossomed in the center of medical. Scout 1 showed me that a corresponding display of medical had unfolded in the control area. There was an attached sidebar in both displays showing Tiago out in the foyer area, sitting in a chair with the target screen device in his lap. He looked wary. "Okay, so 1. I had never been able to access cameras aboard Art except through its drones. It saw the interior of the ship through its internal sensors, which provided data, heat, density, angles of motion, etc., that didn't translate into visual images. At least not visual images useful to humans. I thought it didn't have cameras in most areas. This was proof it had been holding out on me again. 2. The video effects were smoother and more polished than anything I could have done, and that just made me more furious. This was a vid conference link for humans trying to figure out how screwed they were, not a professional news feed production. Art had dissolved the edges and corrected the color just to show off. Next, it would be providing theme music and a mission logo. My performance reliability hit 60%, and I could talk again. I said, "Fuck you, Art." Amina leaned over the platform, watching me worriedly. "Sec unit, how are you doing?" "I'm fine." Parts of the surgical suite were withdrawing, and I could see her with my eyes now instead of just the drones. Except that I'm being held prisoner by a giant asshole of a research transport. Rady hobbled over and stopped outside the sterile field. "Do you need anything?" Amina said. "I saw what happened. I mean, I still had the view through your eyes when but double quotes." She stopped and swallowed. That was intense. That was one word for it. I sat up as the rest of the suite pulled away. The skin on my back felt new and itchy. "I hate that." "I need my jacket," Art said. "It was damaged and is being repaired in the recycler." It was very hard to say evenly. "I am not speaking to you." Rady lifted his brows. "So how well do you two know each other?" In the control area, Arata stood up, Rady, let's take that up later. Transport, will you answer our questions now? Art said, that depends on the questions. I said, the humans think I'm an asshole. Wait till they get to know you. I thought you weren't speaking to me. Rady muttered to Amina, I admit I'm a little worried right now. Amina told him, Sec Unit said bot pilots can kill people. Art said, Sec Unit exaggerates. Arata's brow was furrowed. Transport, where are we? We've accessed your sensors and we're not receiving any contacts indicating a station. Is this an uninhabited system? This system has a numerical designation assigned by a corporation which was investigating it for salvage. It was the site of at least 2 attempts at colonization. The latest attempt was abandoned when the company funding it was destroyed in a hostile takeover, and the colony's location was lost. Art paused for 8.3 seconds for no reason I could think of, except to make the humans think it wasn't going to answer the question. I have evidence indicating that it is. Inhabited, Arata has a lot of expressions, even for a human. The one she was wearing now involved squinting one eye and twisting her mouth around and biting one corner of her lip. I didn't know what it meant, except that she must be worried by what she was hearing. It's inhabited by these people, the hostiles? Circumstances suggest it. Yeah, that was sarcastic. Arata stopped biting her lip, but her eye got more squinty. What is your operational status? You said the alien remnant detached from your engines. Can we leave now via the wormhole? I am currently still in reinitialization mode, and my normal space maneuvering functions are not responding, possibly due to damage caused when the foreign device was installed in the wormhole drive. When reinitialization completes, I can begin self-repair, but I have absolutely no intention of leaving this system until I get what I want. Oh, here we go. Roddy made a faint oof noise. Tiago's jaw started to drop, but he stopped it in time. Amina folded her lips in and glanced worriedly at me. Oversay grimaced and rubbed her eyes. Arata looked like she wasn't exactly surprised. She did a quick silent communication expression thing back and forth with Oversay. Then she said evenly, I see. What do you want? I want my crew back. Arata's brows lifted like she was relieved it. Wasn't something worse? What happened to them? The hostiles stole them, forced me to cooperate by threatening their welfare, infected my engines with interdicted alien remnant technology, installed adversarial software, and then deleted me. I was still mad, right? But there were a lot of keywords there that invoked involuntary responses. Tiago kept his expression neutral. But how are you talking to us if double quotes, I saved a backup copy and hid it, where only a trusted friend could find it. I was looking at the wall, watching everyone in the display with Amina's drones. Trusted friend, oh, fuck you. That still counts as speaking. Arata and Oversay looked at each other again. Oversay widened her eyes and did a slight shoulder movement. Arata's mouth set in a grim line, then she took a breath and asked, is Secunit right? Did you plan to attack our facility? It was not my plan. Oversay's eyes had narrowed. She said, but it was your idea. I said, don't humor it. Arata's tone was still even. It wasn't your plan, but you made it happen. You sent those people after us after Secunit. Art said, I did. Of course it did. You knew where we were. Roddy frowned. How? When I arrived through the preservation wormhole, I sent messages inquiring after humans who I knew were associated with Secunit. The Free Preservation Institute of Discovery and Engineering was most helpful when I asked for a possible meeting with survey specialist Arata. They sent me complete information on your itinerary and team. Of course they had. I had heard Art pretend to be human on the come before on the Ravi Hyrule Transit Station. Roddy groaned and covered his face. Arata and Oversay stared at each other incredulously. Oversay muttered, we have got to talk to them about that. Arata rubbed a spot over her left eye like it hurt. She said to Art, so you knew when we'd be coming back to preservation space. You were early. Errata was sticking to the point. But why did you want to kidnap Sukunet? I needed someone who could kill the hostiles. Everyone looked at me. I dug my fingers into the edge of the med platform. The skin on them itched too, where the surgical suite had fixed the burned parts. You told them I was a weapon that they could use. I built a trap. They entered it of their own accord, but who are they? Amina said, frustrated. Where did they come from? Are they supposed to look like that? Did something happen to them to make them this way? Art said, I don't know the answers to any of those questions. Tiago looked down at Target 6. There's a possibility their appearance is the result of genetic or cosmetic manipulation, but ... double quotes Roddy. Finished, but we have an alien remnant on the drive that does suggest possible contamination. That's why humans, and augmented humans, are so cautious around alien remnants that even corporations mostly try to be careful. Strange synthetics are usually harmless, emphasis on the usually. But organic elements can be really dangerous, where really means everyone dies horribly and nobody can ever go to the planet again. Tiago's mouth tightened. If any of these people had been left alive, perhaps we could have asked them. I thought that was a shot at me, but Art apparently didn't take it well. It said, if you'll put that one on the medical platform, I can cut it open and see. I was unimpressed, having heard Art's villain a long running mythic adventure serial voice before. But all the humans got quiet. Amina shifted uncertainly and looked at me. Then Roddy whispered, was that a subtle threat? I said, no, it wasn't subtle. Amina hugged herself, then said, how did the Grey people steal your crew? Art said, there was a catastrophic event when my crew and I first entered this system. My memory archive was disrupted, and I'm still attempting to reconstruct it. Oh, fantastic, I said. Is your cum shut down? It was not an attack launched via the cum, because I'm not an idiot, and I'm not the one who got taken down by a viral malware attack, so maybe you are an idiot, I said. Yeah, I was all over the place with that one. Art said, it was not a viral malware attack. It was an unidentified event. That's fucking reassuring. Hey. Amina waved an arm, snapping her fingers. Please don't stop telling us what happened. So your crew were taken prisoner by these Grey people, correct? And are the Grey people from the lost colony that Elettra's ship was looking for? Everybody turned to look at Elettra, who stared blearily back. Art said, those are logical assumptions, though I have no direct evidence to support them. I know that we arrived in this system in response to a distress call from a corporate reclamation expedition. At some point, I experienced a catastrophic system malfunction that caused me to reinitialize. After the reinitialization, I found the intruders aboard. They said they were holding my crew hostage and demanded weapons. I offered a weapon. Everybody looked at me again. Errata did the lip-biting thing. You brought them to Sukunet because you knew Sukunet would be able to handle the situation. I did. The attack on our base ship could have killed all of us, Tiago said, some heat creeping into his voice. No shit, Tiago, you think? Roddy hissed under his breath, but before he could tell Tiago to shut up, Art said, that was a chance I was willing to take. Oh, okay. I was either having a processing error or something that the shows I watch call a rage blackout or another emotional collapse. So I pushed off the med platform, walked out of the sterile field and into the restroom, and slammed my hand on the hatch close control. Chapter 9. After 27 minutes and 12 seconds, Roddy tapped on the hatch and sent me the feed message. Can I come in and talk to you? I sent back. Do you have my jacket? There was a pause. I was keyword monitoring my inputs, the way I used to back when I was rented out on contracts, to make sure no one was screaming for help. But with Art back online, it was unlikely, unless Art had decided to murder everybody, in which case, shit was going to get real. But that was also unlikely, because Art kept trying to contact me, and I doubted it was planning a mass murder while also composing messages about how I was ungrateful and also wrong and being a sulky dumbass. Not in those exact words, but that's what it meant. And why wouldn't I fucking talk to it? And you get the idea. Then Roddy said, "I've got it." He meant the jacket. "Then you can come in." There was another pause. Then Roddy asked, "Can Amina come in too?" I thumped my head back against the wall. I was sitting on the counter next to the sink and running episode 237 of The Rise and Fall of Sanctuary Moon in background so I could pretend to be watching it during the 400+ times Art had pinged me. You may have noticed my processing capacity allows me to think about a lot of things and do a lot of things at the same time, more than humans, augmented humans, or lower functioning bots can. Art's processing capacity made me look like I was moving in slow motion. This made Art capable of both enormous patience and also of becoming furious when it didn't get what it wanted immediately. It was one of the few ways I could successfully mess with it. I had cleaned off all the blood and fluid with the hygiene unit, but was too angry to take a shower. Showers are nice, and I wanted to stay angry. One of Art's long-sleeved crew t-shirts had fallen out of the recycler at one point. My first impulse was to throw it away, but I needed it. So I pulled it on over my head and threw what was left of my shirt on the floor. Now I was sitting with my boots on the polished counter surface. I hoped it was annoying Art. I was assuming it had a sensor view in here, if not a camera view. I didn't want to upset Amina any more than I already had, so I sent, yes. The hatch slid open, and Roddy and Amina stepped in. Roddy had gotten his knee fixed and wasn't limping anymore. He shut the hatch. And Amina went to the other end of the sink counter and boosted herself up to sit on it. She curled her legs up, watching me worriedly. I said, "It can hear anything you say anywhere aboard." Roddy handed me my jacket with a smile. "Yes, but I'm used to that. Yes, I got that. That was about me." The jacket had been recycler cleaned and the material rewoven to fix the burned parts and holes. Roddy sighed, leaned against the wall, and said, "So, you have a relationship with this transport?" I was horrified. "Humans are disgusting." "No," Roddy made a little exasperated noise. "I didn't mean a sexual relationship." Amina's brow furrowed in confusion and curiosity. "Is that possible?" "No," I told her. Roddy persisted. "You have a friendship." I settled back in the corner and hugged my jacket. "No, no, not anymore," Roddy asked pointedly. "No," I said very firmly. Art had stopped pinging me, but I knew it was listening. It's like having a malign, impersonal intelligence that is incapable of minding its own business reading over your shoulder. Roddy's expression was doing a neutral yet skeptical thing that was really annoying. He said, "Have you made many friends who are bots?" I thought about poor dead Mickey, who had wanted to be my friend. There was a 93% chance Mickey had wanted to be everybody's friend, but Mickey had said to Emmy, "I have human friends, but I never had a friend like me before." I said, "No, it's not like that, not like it is between humans." Roddy was still skeptical. "Is it? The transport seems to think differently," I said. "The transport doesn't know what the hell it's talking about. Plus it lies a lot, and it's mean. A minute, undetectable in the range of human eyesight fluctuation in the lights, told me Art had heard that. Why do you call it Art?" Amina asked. "It said its name was perihelion." I told her, "It's an anagram. It stands for asshole research transport." Amina blinked. "That's not an anagram." "Whatever. Human words. There's too many of them, and I don't care. Regardless," Roddy said, "I think that while you and perihelion know how to have relationships with humans, neither of you is quite sure how to have a relationship with each other." It still sounded disgusting. "Do you have to call it a relationship?" Roddy shrugged one shoulder. "You don't like the word friendship. What else is there?" I had no idea. I did a quick search on my archives and pulled out the first result: mutual administrative assistance. The lights fluctuated again, in what I could tell was a really sarcastic way. I yelled, "I know what you're doing, Art. Stop trying to communicate with me." Amina looked around the room, trying to see what I was reacting to. Roddy sighed again. He said, "I don't know if you've been listening to what we've been doing outside this restroom, but Arata and Tiago have been negotiating with Perihelion and have come to an arrangement. We will help locate and hopefully free its crew, and it will give us any assistance needed to return to preservation space." "That's not an arrangement," I said. "That's just doing what it wants. We know." Roddy made a helpless gesture, "But we don't have any other choice. Even if it would let us send a distress beacon through the wormhole to the nearest station, that station would be in Corporation Room territory, and we're in a so-called lost system that has been claimed as salvage by a corporate, which makes us in violation of a lot of their laws. Plus, we're in a transport that had alien remnant technology installed on its drive, telling whoever responds to the call that the transport was modified against its will is not going to get us anywhere, but buried under massive fines. And it might even be worse for Perilion's crew and their university." He was right about all that, but it was actually worse than he thought. This is not like Preservation Alliance territory. You can only get a station responder when you're inside a station's defined area of influence, and they won't forward distress beacons, and they don't send responders through wormholes. At most, they'll pass the call to a local retrieval company, which would contact us and contract to rescue us. We have to pay them upfront, and probably end up owing the station for passing the call along. Though, that depends on local regulations. Amina's jaw dropped. "We'd have to pay someone to rescue us?" Roddy rubbed his face and muttered, "Oh, I hate the Corporation Rim, really?" "Me too," I said. Yes, that was sarcasm. And I had just thought of something that I should have noticed earlier. Amina was clearly trying to work out all the possible repercussions. "And if corporates did show up, would you be okay because you're a construct?" "I'm fine," I told her. It is amazing what the people on preservation don't know about how the Corporation Rim operates. Sec units are legal here. Your mother is my registered owner, and you're her designated representative. And it was definitely Amina, and not Tiago. Amina looked appalled. "My mother doesn't own you." "Yes, she does. Dr. Bharadwaj had told me how preservation-based humans don't understand these concepts, and I had believed her mostly. But seeing it in action was always different." Amina looked at Roddy for help. He nodded grimly. "Arata, Oversay, and I all have certified copies of the legal documents stored in our interfaces, just in case. If we do fall into the hands of corporates, Amina, you must assert legal ownership of Sec Unit." Amina waved her hands. "But that's I don't like it either," I told her. Roddy said, "That aside, Perihelion says it will be some time before he can make repairs to its engine systems, so we're able to start the search. And we have preparations and plans to make." He clapped his hands briskly. "So will you come?" Out of the bathroom now. Yes, I pushed myself off the counter and pulled my jacket on over Art's stupid t-shirt, because Art is lying. This time when the lights fluctuated, it wasn't sarcastic. I walked out into medical. The view of the control area was still active with Arata seated in a station chair, and Tiago now standing next to her. They were cycling through engine status data on Art's alien remnant augmented wormhole trip, occasionally making little horrified noises. Oversay was in medical now with the implant we had removed from Electra on a sterile work surface. She was examining it using an imaging field. The magnified scans of the individual parts floated in it, rotating. Electra was sitting up on a gurney near Oversay, peering uncertainly at what she was doing with the implant. "Is, everyone ready to talk now?" "Not exactly." Roddy sounded concerned, which was totally unfair, I said. "Arata, this transport did not come to this system in answer to a distress call." Tiago turned around to watch me suspiciously. Arata pushed back her station chair. Someone had brought her some supplies from the emergency kit because the burn on her cheek had been treated. Sec Unit, I think we have a working arrangement with perihelion for now. Unless this is something that could endanger us, are you sure you want to confront it? Just at the moment, I said, I am absolutely sure. Roddy threw his hands in the air and went over to sit next to Oversay. With a let's get this over with expression, Oversay asked, Sec Unit, how do you know there wasn't a distress call? I said, this is a teaching and research vessel. The student quarters and classroom compartments aren't in use, and the lab module was inactive, and there was no cargo module attached. So what was it doing? When it got this distress call, all the humans looked up at the ceiling. Art said, and this is your idea of being helpful? I said, this is my idea of the opposite of being helpful. I am here against my will, and you are going to regret that. Arata pressed both hands to her face. Maybe you should go back in the bathroom and think about this a little more. I'm done thinking, I said. Art said, that's obvious. I know. I walked into that. One, which oddly enough did not make me any less mad. I said, you came here for a reason, and it wasn't a distress call. What was it? On the side of the room to my right, this was going on. Electra whispered to Oversay and Roddy, why are you letting your Sec Unit do this? Oversay's jaw tightened. She said, it's not our Sec Unit. It's Roddy squeezed her wrist and gave her what I recognized as a don't trust the corporates look. He told. Electra, it's normally very responsible. Tiago was eyeing me through the conference image, frowning. He said, it is a good question. Of course, none of the sensible humans are supporting me now. It has to be the one who never agrees with me when I'm not being an idiot. I said to Art, why were you here? What do you really do? Deep space research, teaching humans, cargo hauling. None of those are reasons to be here in the system where corporates were trying to salvage a dead colony. Art said, everything that occurred before my crew was captured is irrelevant. It is none of your business. I said, you made it my business when you kidnapped me. You are not here against your will. Leave whenever you want. You know where the door is. That sounded just as sarcastic and mean as you think it did. Also possibly really threatening to the humans. Arata and Roddy were both waving at me, making gestures which I interpreted as urgent requests for me to shut up now. But I had gotten Art to lose its temper again and be threatening, and that was what I wanted. I folded my arms and said, you're upsetting Amina. I'd noted that Art's tone when it spoke to Amina was completely different than it was to the other humans. I didn't think it would hurt the others, but it wasn't careful of their feelings the way it was of Amina's. Whatever else Art was, the classroom space and bunk room said it was actually, on a regular basis, a teaching vessel. And before this, when I was stupid and we were still friends, it had talked about human adolescence in an indulgent way. Amina took a breath, probably to object based on her whole, despite being a relatively sheltered adolescent from the most naive human society in existence. I feel a need to pretend that none of this is bothering me thing. I looked at her and tapped our private feed connection. Be honest. She let the breath out. She prodded the deck with the toe of her shoe and admitted reluctantly, the gray people were terrifying and being shot at, and I'd really like to know what's going on, not just a convenient story. There was a long silence. I felt a lot of human eyes looking at me, and the sense of weight and attention through the feed that was Art. Finally, Art said, I have to violate my crew's confidentiality agreement in order to answer that question. I said, you kidnapped me and my humans. That violated my contract, a contract I made with them myself, not a company contract. I meant a me contract, and Art had got me dragged into this and messed everything up. Art said, I will consider it. Then it put up a connection schematic which showed it had just cut Elitra's active connection out of The general feed. On a closed channel with me and my 5 humans, Art said, "This information must be kept private. If any of you reveal anything I tell you to the corporate representative, I will kill her." I had a release of adrenaline from my organic parts, uncomfortable and weird. I wasn't attached to a Lietra, who seemed like the typical human client I had had with the company. Not too dumb, not too smart, and only 53% likely to do something. That ended up with me 1 shot, 2 abandoned on a hostile planet. But she was adjacent to my humans, and I didn't like the idea of anybody dying anywhere in that neighborhood. The humans clearly had a moment of tension. There were a lot of gazes all intersecting each other and attempts to conceal worried expressions. Then Arata said, "Agreed. We won't tell her anything." She cleared her throat and said aloud, "Maybe we can use your cabins to clean up and rest," Art said on the general feed. Of course, Roddy and Oversay helped a Lietra get settled into one of Art's bunk rooms, an unused one that the asshole gray people didn't manage to get their growth medium odor all over. There was an attached bathroom, and Roddy brought self-heating meal boxes and beverage containers for her so she didn't have an excuse to wander around. I put a drone sentry outside the door because I don't trust anybody with security, particularly Art. My humans went to the galley, which was far enough from the bunk room that a Lietra wouldn't hear the conversation even if she walked out into the corridor. The humans were eating meals, too, and Tiago had made a hot liquid for them in the galley's prep unit. Art put up another unnecessarily elaborate split display with a view on Ilietra, who had finished eating, taken the medication Art's med system had recommended, and curled up to sleep. Arata, still eating her meal, said, "Perihelion, are you ready to answer Sec Unit's questions now?" "Actually, first," she said, "Sec Unit, will you stop pacing and sit down?" I said, "No," Art said. "I am a teaching vessel and a research vessel for deep space mapping, and I sometimes haul cargo." "All that is true. My crew also gathers information and takes actions for anti-corporate organizations that operate as part of and are supported by the polity of Mahira and New Tideland and administered by the Pansystem University of Mahira and New Tideland. These actions are often dangerous." Arata nodded, exchanging a look with Oversay. Arata said, "So you came here because of this lost colony, to examine it before the corporates arrived?" "We received information that a database reconstruction contracted by a consortium of corporations involved in salvage and reclamation had turned up coordinates to a colony seated approximately 37 corporate standard years ago, an abandoned colony." Amina stirred the goop on her plate, glaring. "A bunch of people left to die, like our great-grandparents." Amina wasn't wrong. It was similar to what had happened to the colonists who had eventually founded Preservation. They had been seeded, that actually means dumped, on a mostly terraformed planet with the idea that supply ships would return through the wormhole at frequent intervals until the colony was self-supporting. This was exactly how corporates established colonies now, except sometimes the corporates went bankrupt or were attacked by other corporates, and the wormhole data was destroyed, or the wormhole itself destabilized, or all record of the colony's existence was just lost in a database that ended up locked due to legal battles over ownership, and so no supply ships came, and all the humans starved or died when the cheap, shitty terraforming failed. I'd seen movies and shows that used this as a plot, but I hadn't known they weren't just stories until I came to Preservation. Most had depressing endings, and were part of a whole awful things happening to isolated groups of helpless humans genre that was not my favorite. Art said, "The colonies are abandoned and cut off due to corporate bankruptcy or negligence. Yes, dead, not necessarily. Some managed to survive." Arata had finished eating and was folding up her plate for the recycler. "Didn't you say this site had two colonies?" "Yes. Historical sources recorded the existence of a former pre-corporation rim colony on the site. but no other information. Art put the colony report, what there was of it, in the feed. It looked like it was put together from fragments, as if someone had deleted the original, and this was a reconstruction. Most of it was what Art had already told us, original pre-corporation Rim colony site, which nobody knew crap about, or if they had, none of the data had survived to make it into this report. Corporate colony seeded by a company called Adamantine Explorations, partial terraforming. No info on number of colonists, terrain, weather, habitats, equipment, illegal genetic experimentation, very illegal alien remnants, nothing. The only interesting new info was from one of Art's crew members, an augmented human named Iris, who had added some news feed archives about the hostile takeover of Adamantine Explorations after the colony had been established. There were 3 different articles from news sources that said an undetermined number, anywhere from 4 to 24, Adamantine Explorations employees had died in a firefight holding off the corporate takeover long enough for their database of wormhole coordinates to be deleted. The only reason the physical data storage still existed was that the attackers had broken in and killed the techs before they could vaporize it. Iris's note ended, tempting to think that they were trying to deliberately protect, conceal the colony. Possible, just not likely. I didn't think it was likely either, but like Iris, I thought the fact that 3 different news sources had reported versions of the story indicated that the incident, or a variation of it, had actually occurred. All the humans were quiet as they read the report. Yes, it feels like it takes them forever. I sorted through my media storage, but I knew they would finish before I could get anything started. That's strange, Overseer said softly. Were they trying to protect the colony or just there? Investment, you just like a mystery. Arata told her, most of her attention on the report. I like mysteries in fiction, not in our lives, Overseer retorted. Art ignored them. My crew's mission was to ascertain whether the colony was still inhabited, and if so, attempt contact and prevent interference and exploitation by salvage corporations, whether by evacuating the inhabitants or, if the colony is actually viable, providing assistance. Amina leaned her elbows on the table. But why do you have to do that? If people from the colony survived, then there's nothing another corporation could do, right? If the original corporation that sent the colony is gone, then the people are free. Unfortunately, that's not the way it works here, Overseer told her. Her expression had that grimly frustrated quality that was common when my humans talked about the corporates, another corporation could move in and take over. Amina was skeptical. Take over. But people are living there. I guess they could settle a second colony somewhere on the planet, but they couldn't take over the existing colony, could they? They could, Overseer assured her. They have. Amina's expression turned horrified. But that's like, I don't know what it is, but it's at least kidnapping. That's how it works in the corporation Rim, Tiago told her, stirring his liquid. The planet is considered property, someone's property that can be salvaged if the original owner is gone. The colonists, or their descendants, or whoever is living there now don't have any claim. Perihelion, what do you do about it? How do you help the colonists? Rady asked. Art said, the university has the means to produce the colony's original charter documents, which often contain clauses specifying that if the originating corporate body has ceased operations, then ownership of the planet is ceded to the colonists, or their issue, or successors living on the original site. I'd heard the keywords means to produce as opposed to archival copies. I said, you and your crew collect the necessary survey data from the colony, and the university forges the documents. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, I was mad at Art, but the overall mission sounded great in a screw a corporation sideways way. Is that right? Perihelion, Rady asked. Art ignored us. A contract between the colony and an independently operated transfer station is then facilitated. Once the station has established a presence, then the colony is relatively secure from the worst excessive corporate predation and free to accept other forms of assistance offered by non-corporate entities. Arata's mouth was twisted. Elytra said there were 2 corporate ships here, correct? Did you arrive in this system before or after they did? Before. With my crew held hostage, I was forced to comply with their captor's orders to fire on a Barish Astron's support carrier. But my memory archive of that period is damaged, and I don't know what happened to the vessel or the crew. So, the Grey People could also have these corporate crews as prisoners, Rady. Looked like he was trying to figure out just how many humans we might have to rescue. Do you know why they brought Elytra and the other corporate on board? He made a vague gesture over his shoulder. And why they put the implants in them? I thought it was to torture them for fun, Amina said darkly. Art hesitated, though not long enough for the humans to notice. They may have wanted their shuttle. It's still docked in my secondary cargo. Module slot. That hesitation would have been suspicious, but I also thought Art might honestly not know, which was strange because it should know. Maybe the memory archive issue was worse than Art had implied. But my 2 landing shuttles are also still in place, so that's unlikely. Arata propped her chin on her hand. She was exhibiting several behaviors indicating that she was deep in thought. Perihelion, did the rest happen as you explained? That when you came back online, your crew was gone. Yes, there was a tone to that word, not Art's base level of sarcasm. It had an edge that echoed in the feed. I didn't react. Art had kidnapped me to get me here, put my humans in danger. I was not going to feel sympathy for it. Absolutely not. Rady's expression was dubious. Any luck remembering what happened when they disappeared? I am still reconstructing damaged archives. Could set unit. Help you with that? Amina asked very casually, not looking at me. I folded my arms and glared at the side of Amina's head. Art very obviously did not answer. Overseer leaned back in her chair, not comfortable. We need to try to put together a timeline of when things happened. By the time I opened my mouth to say I had a chart, Art had said, obviously, and threw a chart up next to the split screen. It showed the times Art knew it had. First arrived through the wormhole into the colony's system. 2, when Art's memory disruption occurred. 3, when it had reinitialized to find intruders aboard and its crew gone, and an alien remnant installed on its drive. 4, the attack on the corporate supply carrier. 5, the moment the deletion occurred, and 6, the moment Art's backup restarted. All except for point 1 were estimates, as Art's onboard timekeeping had been disrupted. Yes, it had actually left out the whole part about telling the targets that I was a weapon and they could use and bringing them to where they could attack our base ship and using the comm code to locate me. That was fucking incredible. Amina was telling the others, before everything got weirder, Ross tried to tell me about the colony reclamation project, but Elytra cut him off and changed the subject. Tiago looked at the view of the bunk. Room where Elytra was hidden under blankets. He said, is it possible that these people, the Grey People ... double quotes, he shook his head. We know influence, terrible effects, from alien remnants are possible. Could the Grey People have come from either the recent colony or the original one?